My parents made me the other kid, while my sister became their golden child and destroyed my life. I can't make my update without it, so I'm reposting it. Except for this caption, nothing has changed. It's just as it was before the moderators of the entitled parents took it down. After reading a similar experience online, I felt compelled to share my own. I'm publishing this as my one and only Reddit post since I felt that sharing it might make me feel a little better. I've had some counseling, and discussing this topic in particular was quite beneficial. Why not just share it online as well, I reasoned. This year, I turned 18, and I recently moved out on my own, away from my parents. My sister is roughly 10 years my junior. She almost didn't make it to term because her pregnancy wasn't intended. Since I was never given much information, I don't know many specifics about how difficult my mother's second pregnancy was, but I do know that it was extremely taxing on her body, as my sister's birth prevented her from having any more children. That year, she spent a lot of time in and out of the hospital. My mother also nearly died during the birth. Because my younger sister might not have been born, it caused her and my father to get attached to her. With the exception of times when they needed a free babysitter, I felt like the other kid in the house ever since. My parents' long-term favoritism has led me to believe that they were truly insane for failing to recognize the precise harm it was causing to me. And now, starting with my 11th birthday, I'll describe how it's rebounding on them. My sister was 2 years old when she wept upon seeing a birthday cake that wasn't hers, therefore my parents asked me to let her blow out my candles. My parents had me do it even though I didn't want to. The moment felt totally wrecked, but they relit the candles so I could do it again later. The following year, the year after that, and so on, all experienced the same thing. They simply persisted in enforcing it until it was standard. My birthdays also had to include gifts for my sister. Hers never had any on mine. They simply said that I'm a boy and boys don't need to worry about it as much, when I questioned why. I understand that I was a child, but did they truly believe that what I said was wise? Not at all. Every time I had a birthday, my parents would pick a location that my sister preferred above mine. After a while, it seemed more like I had no birthdays while my sister had two. Beyond this, my sister became the center of my parents' entire existence. My sister had to agree with me if I wanted to do something. Otherwise, it was vetoed unless I could complete it by myself. Video games didn't seem to bother me there, until my sister wanted to come in and irritate me, so I learned to just lock myself in my room with them. That's why I locked the door. I was an irate teenager who was sick of being interrupted at any time, so when my parents asked me to take it off, I freaked out. My parents were mad at me for being nude in my own room, and my sister repeatedly ran in when I was naked. They retracted their objection and simply let me keep the lock after I pointed out how ridiculous it was. Because she was being pampered every day, my sister developed a princess complex. I avoided her as much as possible since she was highly demanding. I used every justification I could find to avoid dealing with her, even if it meant making things up, in order to have some alone time. I had more alone time once my parents hired a teenage girl to watch me. After my sister refused to listen to her, the babysitter quit, and my parents attempted to avoid paying her by saying she did a poor job. After the girl enlisted the help of others, my parents ultimately gave her the money she was due. After that, they recruited a second girl to watch the kids on a regular basis, and she stayed. I went out of my way to keep myself occupied with my part-time job whenever I could, but my parents still made it obvious that I was expected to care for my sister on any day I had free time. My sister gave me directions and treated me like her own butler. She would not quit using her ridiculous moniker for me. The mere mention of that moniker gets me furious. She would call our parents and cry if I didn't give her whatever she wanted, and I would then face consequences for mistreating her. This led to a lot of heated disputes between us, and once I refused to give in anymore, my relationship with my parents deteriorated to the point that we hardly spoke to each other for a while. However, they had the audacity to boast to other parents that they were the reason I put in so much effort during my high school graduation. Although they weren't incorrect, the explanation they were considering wasn't the one that actually occurred. I put a lot of effort into waiting to be free. However, my parents pretended to have accomplished a lot. Perhaps they did, prior to the birth of my sister. After that, though, it was all about her. Unless parent-teacher conferences were approaching, they didn't even inquire about my schooling. I received a B and C average when I graduated. Even though the trip was supposed to be for me, my sister always had more fun than I did when my parents took me there after I graduated. However, everything really came to a head in July, when I turned 18. Despite the fact that it was my 18th birthday, it didn't seem to be about me. I fervently hoped that, for once, we would be dining at my favorite restaurant. Instead, they had the celebration at Chuck E. Cheese, a local copycat. It became the go-to location for anything big because it was the only one like it in the area. Kids half my age were having their celebrations all around me. I had nothing to do but eat terrible pizza and play outdated arcade games and claw machines for tickets to insignificantly expensive prizes since I was so bored. My parents then produced a pink cake with white flowers on it when it was time for cake. It was clearly not a boy cake, even though it bore my name. There were only 10 candles, which was worse. In front of my sister, my parents blew out the candles and placed the cake. That's when it happened at last. I suddenly experienced a mental flashback of all the repressed annoyance. I then broke down in tears. I was crying in front of the entire family as an 18-year-old boy. Time appeared to stop because everyone was so shocked. All of the things I had been suppressing for the last 8 years just poured out like word vomit when I woke up. The whole family was able to see it. I went outside to sit beside the family car after I was finished. My parents kept the pink cake covered until it was served. So many relatives followed me to apologize and explain that they were unaware of it. The fact that they were unaware didn't matter, I said. For the past 8 years, Little Miss Sunshine had dominated my life while they all looked on. My celebrations and birthdays were all about her, so I didn't really have any of my own. Then, on the most important birthday of my life, they all expected me to simply nod and smile as usual while they gave my sister a cake that was specifically for her, even though it wasn't her birthday. Some of them began apologizing to me, but they gave explanations, claiming that they simply assumed I was fine with it since my parents had told me so. I informed them that I would never tolerate it. I just pretended to accept it after my parents made me do it every year. I instructed them to glance around as I spread my arms. Did this seem like the location I had in mind for my 18th birthday and graduation celebration? All this time, nobody even made an effort to defend me. My sister had it all, and I was just the other kid. My parents stopped allowing me to invite my friends long ago after they attempted to express their disapproval of my sister blowing out my candles, so I never even got to have them there. Was wanting a year that was about me and not her really that bad? There are 365 days in a year. Instead, because I want my own birthday, I'm treated like the entitled, avaricious brat that I am. I resumed my nasty crying. By then, my mother was sobbing too, so my father rushed outside to scold me for creating such a big spectacle. Everyone in the room now believes they are awful parents because I destroyed my sister's moment. I shouted back at him that he should understand why they are bad parents. The rest of the family surrounded him like a swarm of wolves when I said that. I had never seen anything like it before, but I guess it was better late than never. The majority of the throng rushed back inside with my father to argue with my mother after he was virtually backed up to the restaurant's front entrance. My grandparents stayed with me and expressed regret for spending so much time with their eyes closed. I'm not sure what was said to my parents in the restaurant, but they didn't return for around 30 minutes. They appeared completely defeated when they did. Both of my parents were unable to look me in the eyes, and my mother was still sniffling after sobbing so much. Both of them made clumsy excuses for their actions and promised to have the party somewhere else. However, the crowd didn't find it to be sufficient. My parents emphasized that they would never force me to let my sister blow out my candles again, give her gifts on my birthday, or make it about her in any way. One of my uncles cleared his throat pretty loudly. In addition to apologizing for bringing me a cake that was clearly not intended for me, there was another loud cough. They claimed they believed that at my age, cake was no longer a concern for me. Whoa, that was a terrible thing to say. I lost my temper again and screamed at them that it didn't matter how old I was. For years, they had given my sister my birthday without any justification, and they were aware of it. I informed them that since it was too late, there was no need in having the party again. They had made it quite evident that they didn't care about me. I brought up the fact that they had destroyed 8 years of my life before I reached adulthood. What birthdays with them would I be able to anticipate in the future? My father became upset with me for saying so, but he stopped talking after the whole family yelled at him. My grandfather informed him that I was entirely correct and that the harm could not be reversed. He claimed that ever since my sister was born, my parents were terrible individuals who took advantage of me and treated me like a black sheep. Furthermore, he claimed that they were all terrible because they simply allowed it to occur. He went on to say that I owed my life back, not just an apology. I resisted her attempts to approach me as she sobbed my name and apologized, but my mother broke down once more. She was body blocked from approaching half of the household. I just remarked that I was at my breaking point and turned to go. I was found and brought back by one of my aunts. I was so angry that I couldn't even be happy for any justice after all this time, even though I could hear several family members screaming and swearing at my parents over what had transpired. And throughout all of this, where was my sister? She was still eating cake and tearing apart gifts that were intended for me alone in the restaurant. In case anyone was curious, when I sobbed and left, my parents did offer her some cake. They were later called out on it, even though you would assume it wouldn't be their main concern right now. As everyone else left the party, my grandparents persuaded me to settle down and take a seat in their vintage minivan. When my sister was discovered to be opening my gifts, she pitched a fit. One of those gifts was a brand new smartphone, which she was not permitted to retain, so she hurled it against the wall and destroyed it. A few months prior, on her own birthday, she had received a brand new phone. In the end, I became so angry that I ranted about never wanting to have another birthday party. I was allowed to spend the night at my grandparents' place. I still hadn't spoken to my folks when I got home. My father remained as silent as I did, and my mother simply kept crying because I wouldn't talk to her. My grandparents persuaded me to join them for dinner the next weekend. I was shocked to discover a completely different party waiting for me when we arrived. Almost the whole time, my parents were there, grinning awkwardly and saying, "Don't hate us." A large chocolate cake with 18 candles and even a banner with my name on it was present. Since I didn't actually get to celebrate either this year, they dubbed it my happy belated birthday and graduation party. I had to act like I was delighted. 8 years of partiality cannot be reversed or even somewhat impacted by a one nice party. What happened to my sister? It wasn't all about her like it used to be, so she was sitting at the table with her arms folded and her lip twisted. The family sang me a modified version of Happy Day instead of Happy Birthday. My sister let out an ear-piercing scream as soon as I extinguished the candles. My parents, appearing more distressed than ever, had to take her out quickly and return her later. For the remainder of the celebration, she sulked in silence in her seat. My sister was punished for her actions at the last party by having her smartphone taken away, while I was still given a new one. However, there were other gifts besides the smartphone. My entire family helped out and bought me a car. Even though it was only an old white Volvo, I fell in love with it right away. My grandfather, who had some automotive knowledge, had fixed it himself. My sister was obviously not as delighted as I was. She threw a fit and demanded a car as well, letting out another one of those yells. It took some time for them to return outside after my mother had to take her to the restroom. My father simply returned to his dejected appearance. Their attempt to appear respectable in front of the entire family had been essentially wrecked by my sister. My sister was acting that way because my parents brought her up to be a pampered, entitled princess, according to several family members who also had harsh things to say about them. I immediately began driving the automobile around, but a few days later, my sister damaged it by smashing 2 side windows with a hammer and severely damaging the windshield, rendering the vehicle unusable. She screamed bloody murder as my parents grabbed her and removed the hammer, but they were able to stop her before she could do further harm. She even made an attempt to bite them. My grandfather had worked so hard on that car that everyone, especially my grandparents, was upset with my sister. It was destroyed by my sister's outburst. My sister was so indulged by my grandparents, they acknowledged, that she was unable to process the notion that I could have something that she was not able to. My sister was being raised to be an entitled brat by my parents, who were criticized by a number of other family members for setting her up for failure. They said that because my parents wouldn't enforce their rules and instill respect in her, my sister would have a horrible adult life. She was not unpunished for her acts. My sister was sent to boarding school at the beginning of the new school year after being grounded for the remainder of the summer. My father maintained that it was the only way to begin repairing the harm they had caused, despite my mother's tears. Yes, they admitted their mistakes wholeheartedly. Since no one took their side, it was difficult for them to hide it. At the boarding school, my sister is very miserable. She has been lying nearly non-stop and despises the rules and the outfits. But now that there are cameras everywhere, she can't get away with any of it. She yelled at our parents for placing her in that situation despite their repeated attempts to visit her. I've heard that she might live like this until she turns 18. My car's repairs were covered by my parents. The windshield and windows were replaced by an auto glass firm, and the vehicle now has the same appearance as before. My granddad approached me in August about a job possibility with a friend, but it was 40 minutes away. Unless I liked the lengthy journey, I would have to leave my parents' house. I was all for relocating. It was difficult for me to find my first flat. To get a studio, I had to have my credit card approved, but I was able to do it. Since September, I have been residing here. I don't talk to my parents very much, yet they keep trying to reach me. When we do speak, I always feel uncomfortable and uneasy. According to my grandfather, my parents are attempting to get in touch with me because they are unable to cope with their parental failures. He believes that in order for them to feel better about themselves, they want me to forgive them. However, I will not be forgiving them anytime soon. At last, I'm content and no longer with them. Now they have nothing. Not only do they lack my sister, they also lack me. The cost of my sister's boarding school, in addition to the party they held for me and the repairs they made to my car, forced my parents to work longer hours. All they have left is their job to concentrate on, an empty house, and irate relatives. Although I don't enjoy their suffering, it is ultimately the consequence of their own deeds. Edit. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has given me awards. It holds great significance for me. Despite the fact that my piece was lengthy, I felt a great sense of relief after finishing it. In the comments, I saw some people accusing this post of being phony. I don't hold anything against you. If I were reading this, I would also be quite skeptical. I did, however, live it. That is the reality for some parents. People who had comparable or worse circumstances have even gotten in touch with me. Is it truly so strange that my parents behaved in this manner, given the abundance of horrible parents in the world? I come from a close-knit family where we stick together and do things as a group, so it may sound extreme for the entire family to rush back into the restaurant to confront my dad. At gatherings, it can quickly become the whole group versus one individual. I've witnessed it previously, such as when a cousin who was intoxicated was surrounded and taken away from a gathering to become sober. Although I really dislike collective mentalities, they were helpful in this situation. Words cannot express how ashamed my parents were of what they had done. They were unable to come up with a suitable explanation for their actions without coming across as even worse. They have essentially given up, acknowledging that they have no justification and are making a concerted effort to win my favor. I believe that a large portion of my relatives' assistance was motivated by shame, even though many of you are thanking them for it. With the exception of 2 years during COVID, the majority of them attended those 8 birthdays, but they kept quiet. When my sister blew out my candles, they may have given me a critical look, but they remained silent. Why? My grandfather, the patriarch of the family, is the father of my father. My grandfather can be rather frightening. He will assist you in whatever way he can if you're on his good side. The whole family despises you if you're on his bad side. That's a major factor in my distaste for group mentalities. My grandfather felt embarrassed when he remarked that the whole family was to blame for not supporting me throughout those years. They all contributed to the price of my vehicle. They didn't need to make a significant individual contribution because they had so many relatives. Even the receipt from the time I registered the vehicle in my name is with me. They paid $2,000 for it, plus additional money for tires and parts. My granddad adjusted the fluids and tuned it himself. The interior was thoroughly cleaned by my grandmother. Even though I'm incredibly grateful to each of them, I still wish to keep my distance. To figure things out on my own, I need time. It is likely that I will not see my parents again until Christmas or Thanksgiving. My sister has been likened by some to South Park's Eric Cartman, and it's a fairly accurate comparison. Because my parents gave her a lot of junk food, she is overweight. She despises eating anything nutritious. She once topped mashed potatoes with gummy bears, as I witnessed. I feel sick just thinking about that combination. She also spent a lot of time in the restroom as a result of her bad diet. In order to assist, my parents had to purchase fiber snacks, which I don't believe were inexpensive. My sister always believed she was in charge and is also very bossy. She was always giving me directions, so I would frequently lock myself in my room to avoid her. Because she was so domineering, she lost a lot of friends, but my parents assured her that the youngsters were envious of her uniqueness. When things didn't go her way, my sister would even call herself a princess and have big tantrums. Although I'm aware that she is more than a caricature, her actions definitely remind me of Eric Cartman. I am aware that my sister is also not a moron. She simply doesn't put out any effort and only received a C average in school. She would most likely receive straight A's a student if she put in the necessary effort. Second edit. It appears that the subreddit has banned me. I'm not sure what I did, perhaps the post was too lengthy. In any case, I am no longer able to respond to comments, but I would want to thank everyone who left encouraging words. Thank you everyone from the bottom of my heart. Update. Here is what has transpired since my parents began celebrating my sister's birthday 8 years ago, for anyone who are curious. It has now been almost a year. I thought I was done here, so I didn't log in for a while. However, one day I decided to check in again and saw a ton of private messages requesting updates. The majority of what I'm going to share with you is based on what my parents and grandparents told me. I'm recounting what I discovered, so don't worry if it seems too bizarre. Yes, I'm doing great, but my parents and younger sister aren't doing so well. My sister made a number of attempts to leave boarding school after I last posted. She tried doing nothing, but it didn't help her. And none of her plots or falsehoods succeeded. She then tried going on a hunger strike, not eating anything until our parents arrived to get her up. My father prevented my mother from jumping into the automobile to save her baby, reminding her that they were to blame for my sister's actions. After fewer than 2 days of her hunger strike, my sister started to seek food in the cafeteria. Snacks and sweets were strictly prohibited at school unless they were nutritious. My parents had received a warning from a pediatrician that unless my sister's nutrition improved, she could develop diabetes in the future and possibly experience stunted growth. Gummy bears on mashed potatoes are out. My sister attempted to bully the other girls at the boarding school, of course, but they didn't put up with her bullshit. She got into a quarrel one day and was attacked by many girls who kicked her until a teacher intervened. My sister was scraped and bruised all over, but she wasn't terribly hurt. She blamed everyone else, of course, and said the other girls should follow her instructions. It should come as no surprise that her peers avoided her. She couldn't understand not getting her way, so she threw a fit. My sister was busted when my mother attempted to sneak junk food to her at the boarding school. My parents got into a heated argument as a result. Although my sister still craves junk food, my mother stopped smuggling it after being caught. My sister eventually turned to self-harm as her schemes became more complex in an attempt to influence her way out of the school. Unbeknownst to her, she stole a knife from the cafeteria and stood on a table, threatening to leave without chocolates. Candy indeed. She broke her left arm, her clavicle, and suffered a concussion when she slid and tumbled off the table during a chaotic time. Even the boarding school didn't want her back at that point. She was admitted to a children's mental health facility after leaving the hospital. She is currently receiving treatment for extreme narcissism, which my parents really encouraged. Unless my parents take her out, she is unable to leave the ward. There, she continues her education and follows a rigorous, healthful diet that she hates. It is personal agony for my sister. My father and I got into yet another heated argument when my mother sought to remove her from the ward. My mother took a bottle off the counter during the dispute and struck him with it, severely slashing his face and shattering his cheekbone. After the police were summoned, my mother was driven away in a police car and my father was brought to the hospital. After that, she spent several months in a mental health facility where she was compelled to face her enabling tendencies and trauma. I don't know the details, but from what I've learned, my mother's behavior is a result of unresolved issues from her own upbringing. My parents are now merely sleeping in different bedrooms, though there has been discussion of a divorce. Regarding myself, I recently turned 19. At a restaurant I enjoy, my grandparents hosted a celebration for me. Although my sister was temporarily permitted to leave the ward for the event, my parents and sister were present. She sat there looking at me like she hoped I would burn, her lip twisted. Because of her forced healthy diet, she had lost weight, but her resentment had not gone away. This time, she didn't scream as I extinguished my candles. Rather, she started sobbing uncontrollably while repeatedly asking why. It was merely another attempt at manipulation. Eventually, she pitched a fit, screaming that there was nothing. No pizza, no presents for her, no prizes. She then began to curse at our parents and made an attempt to leave the restaurant. She was clearly attempting to emulate my actions during my 18th birthday celebration, but it was just another example of her incapacity to acknowledge that not everything is about her. In a twisted manner, she was essentially attempting to replicate what I had done the previous year. I know my sister, even though you might think I'm overanalyzing this. She will take action if she believes it would help her achieve her goals. My grandfather spoke to my parents before they brought my sister home early after apologizing to everyone. My grandmother later provided me with some information. According to my grandfather, my parents had better not give in to my sister's requests or host her own party. He cautioned them that unless they permanently stopped supporting her, this conduct would never stop. After hearing this, my sister recognized that her outbursts were no longer effective. The following morning, she was driven back to the ward after being escorted out of the restaurant while kicking and crying. She is currently there. I'm not sure how long she'll be there. Even though she is only a child, she is the most obstinate person I have ever encountered. Until she reaches her lowest point, I don't think she will change. She's trapped in a situation that doesn't allow her to make demands until then. Not even my parents have attempted to hold me responsible for my sister's behavior during the previous 12 months. They've got to acknowledge that they brought her up to be a narcissist and that I had nothing to do with this. I've discovered that supporting a narcissist is a type of addiction. The only mental disorder my sister has been diagnosed with is narcissism, which she inherited from her upbringing. She has an IQ of about 110, which makes her somewhat smarter than me, but she only works hard when she receives a reward. She was conditioned to think that way, and I think it will take years to change. Regarding myself, I'm succeeding on my own. Although it's difficult, I've had to learn how to manage my finances and take care of myself, but it's still far better than living with my sister and parents. Edit. Someone pointed out that it doesn't make sense for my sister to be in a long-term facility for narcissism alone. It usually wouldn't, I agree. I'm being kept in the dark about any more diagnoses. I can sense that my parents aren't telling me everything, and since I'm not her parent, I can't just question the doctors. Nevertheless, when she doesn't get her way, my sister can be incredibly harmful to herself. It wasn't the only time she threatened herself at the boarding school with a knife. She has used similar threats to control my parents ever since she was admitted to the ward. For instance, she threatened to hurt herself if they didn't take her out for fast food after my 19th birthday. She frequently hits her head against the wall as a strategy. My mother didn't want to report this to the ward, but my father did. My sister has also made up claims of being harmed by doctors, but they never add together. Another element in her situation may be pathological lying, which is probably a major reason she is in a long-term facility. The cycle would repeat if my parents gave in to her demands once more if she were at home. I believe Little Miss Sunshine is relying on it. Third update. My knowledge of Little Miss Sunshine has increased. First of all, I acknowledge that I erred in some of my previous writings, including misrepresenting her age and other specifics. Anyone in my family who reads this would recognize me, even though I'm terrible at arithmetic and frequently try to hide facts to remain anonymous. To be clear, my sister blew out my birthday candles for the first time when she was 3 years old, and I was 8 when she was born. I was bitter as my parents began honoring her on my birthdays from the very beginning. By the time I turned 11, everything revolved around her, presents bearing her name, places she enjoyed, and her assisting me in unwrapping my gifts. Even if my parents acknowledged their mistakes, the years they stole from me still remain. Concerning the diagnosis of my sister, although a person cannot be officially diagnosed with narcissism until they are 18, my father acknowledged that she exhibits symptoms of potential NPD and other disorders. Due to the experiences she experienced as a youngster, my mother was also diagnosed with PTSD and another mental illness. Since my sister is their problem, not mine, my father advised me to overlook the fact that my parents have kept many details ambiguous. One of the most sensible things he has ever said to me is that the present condition of Little Miss Sunshine. She has no definite release date and is still in the ward. Although some of her anger has been tamed by therapy, she still feels entitled to all I own. She even demanded her own apartment during outbursts regarding mine. She has also continued to think that my birthday is hers. She was brought up that way, and my parents are solely to blame. They have requested me to keep quiet about the matter, stating that there is no assurance she will recover and that years of therapy will be necessary. In addition to taking medicine and attending treatment, my mother has become lethargic. She was temporarily committed for beating my father, but for some reason, she kept her job. Her employer let her to work from home for a lower salary. My viewpoint, since my actual birth date is eternally marred, I have made the decision to celebrate my birthday on the day of my belated celebration going forward. Returning to Reddit has caused me stress, even though I thought I was doing okay. My supervisor sent me home for the day because I'm so irritable and cynical. To deal with this, I'm thinking of looking for free counseling or local support groups. I am grateful to everyone who has read and comprehends my suffering. Although you have shown me kindness, I must concentrate on moving past my past. I may never come back here or respond to comments. Last edit, I discovered that I had committed math mistakes once more after reading my post again. My supervisor told me to take a sick day because I've been such a mess. Stress even made me throw up. Another post I came across showed parents chopping up their older child's personalized birthday cake for their golden child. This and other posts like it made me realize how many parents are just like me, changing only after embarrassment but remaining the same on a deep level. I'm cutting off communication with my parents and will talk to my grandparents about it more. I might not make another post here. I'd like to thank everyone who helped me. I found out my parents funded my sister's secret family for years while ignoring my son's medical bills, leading to his death. I never thought I'd write this, but my family's tragedy has utterly ruined me. It tells the story of how my sister and dad betrayed me, causing my 2-year-old son to die. There were 4 of us growing up: my mom, 58F, a math teacher at the local high school; my older sister Sarah, 35F; my dad, 60M, a senior insurance agent at a large firm; and myself, 28F. We appeared to have a lovely life and lived in a nice area, but there was always one major issue: my parents' intense preference for Sarah. Favoritism began at a very young age. Sarah had ballet classes, painting lessons, and piano lessons throughout elementary school. My parents told me we couldn't afford 2 kids participating in extracurricular activities when I begged to join any. While I wore her hand-me-downs, Sarah purchased new clothes from the mall. I used her old phones till they broke, but she always acquired the newest iPhone models. Sarah requested braces at the age of 13. Without hesitation, my parents paid $6,000. When my dentist informed me a year later that I also required braces, they indicated we would have to wait due to financial difficulties. I still have crooked teeth at the age of 28, and I never got them. Sarah received a brand new Honda Civic for her 16th birthday. They advised me to work and save money for a car of my own when I became 16. I only bought a used Toyota that broke down after 6 months of working at McDonald's after school for 2 years. All the way through high school, the trend persisted. While I had to work part-time jobs to pay for necessities like clothes and school supplies, Sarah was free to concentrate only on her education and enjoyable hobbies. When it came time for college, I had to start at a community institution, but Sarah attended a pricey elite university. My parents covered all of her costs, including a condo close to her college and a semester abroad in Paris. To pay for my textbooks and bus fare to school, I worked 2 jobs, one as a campus library assistant and another at a coffee shop. After transferring to State University, I was in my 3rd year when I met my spouse, James, 30M. He worked part-time at the college IT department while pursuing an engineering degree. I felt like someone actually cared about me for the first time when we started dating. James was also from a middle-class family, but when he was in high school, his parents died in a car accident. He worked hard to pay for college while living with his aunt during high school. Before we were married, we dated for 3 years. We were saving money for a down payment on a house, so I planned a little courthouse wedding, but James felt that since it was a once-in-a-lifetime event, I should have a genuine wedding. We organized a little ceremony for perhaps 50 people in a nearby church. Sarah said she had an important work meeting, therefore she didn't arrive. Sarah had arranged a family vacation for that weekend, so my parents nearly skipped it as well. When my mom's sister confronted them about it, they abruptly changed their plans. Tommy was born to me 2 years after we were married. With terrible morning sickness and gestational diabetes, the pregnancy was difficult from the beginning. The worst news arrived in 32 weeks. Doctors discovered Tommy's significant cardiac issue during a routine scan. They stated that beginning immediately after delivery, he would require multiple procedures over the course of his life. Despite our grief, James and I were committed to doing everything in our power to ensure our son's health. The day following Tommy's birth, his first surgery was performed. Although the majority of the $150,000 was covered by insurance, we still had to pay $30,000 out of pocket. We took out loans and spent all of our savings. James began putting in extra hours at his engineering job and taking on weekend freelancing work. I was caring for Tommy while working from home as a virtual assistant. Tommy had to have another operation 6 months later. I turned to my parents for assistance because we were already having trouble paying for the initial operation. They had just returned from a Mediterranean cruise with Sarah that lasted 2 weeks. I stated to them that we had previously sold our car and made every feasible cut while displaying all of our medical expenses. They claimed they couldn't help since they were facing financial difficulties. I didn't know the truth, so I trusted them. We barely made it for the following year and a half. James put in 80-hour weeks until he became so worn out that he passed out on the job. I started taking on additional virtual assistant jobs and began using eBay to sell items from our home. During this period, my parents took 3 family holidays with Sarah and gave her a brand new Mercedes for her birthday. They said that because Sarah worked well in finance, she was responsible for paying for all of these. This turned out to be a lie. Tommy deteriorated significantly last month. His heart suddenly stopped working correctly, necessitating emergency surgery that would have cost $50,000. We didn't have a method to get that much money fast, and our insurance had hit its annual cap. I begged my parents for assistance once more, this time down on my knees. I offered to sign a formal agreement promising to give them our house, double the money they owed, and anything else they desired. They declined once more, stating that recent medical expenses had depleted their savings. We were unable to pay for Tommy's surgery, therefore he passed away 2 days later. He had just turned 2. My parents claimed they had to assist Sarah with an urgent matter, so they barely stayed for 30 minutes at his burial. While tidying Tommy's room yesterday, I discovered my dad's old phone beneath the bed. He must have lost it when he was there 3 weeks prior. I checked the phone, which was still functional, and discovered hundreds of texts between Sarah and my parents. I learned the truth in this way, and it ruined what remained of our family. Sarah had been leading an entirely different life, one that none of us were aware of, according to the texts. She had 3 children in Florida with a man named Mark after 7 years of marriage. All this time my parents had been providing for them financially by giving them large sums of money each month. I read through all of the messages for 5 hours. My parents send Sarah $5,000 a month to cover everyday expenditures. Each of her 3 children attended a private school that they paid $2,000 a month for. They provided coverage for their family's trips to Hawaii and Europe. They spent $400,000 last year on a Hamptons vacation home. My parents even covered the cost of their weekly lawn care and house cleaning service. The most recent correspondence concerned Sarah's desire to purchase a beach property. My parents sent Sarah $75,000 for the down payment 5 days before telling me they couldn't save Tommy. Additionally, there were notes about the 3 new iPads and game consoles they had already purchased for Sarah's children as Christmas gifts. The gifts that each child received exceeded the expense of Tommy's surgery. Our monthly family dinner was held today. Every month on the last Sunday, my aunts, uncles, and cousins all gather at my parents' house. In an effort to keep the family close, my mom established this custom 5 years ago. Typically, about 25 individuals show there. Sarah consistently excused herself from these dinners by citing work obligations. I now know that she was in Florida with her clandestine family. I went to supper with my dad's phone. I used screen mirroring to link the phone to the TV after everyone had finished eating and gone to the living room for coffee. I displayed the financial transfers, the communications, and the pictures of Sarah's covert existence to everyone. I told her how my parents refused to help save their dying grandchild, but had paid her $75,000 for a beach house. My mother began to cry and reached out to give me a hug. I stepped back from her. Sitting there, my dad gazed at the floor. With a sneer on her lips, Sarah, who had actually attended this meal for the first time in years, simply sat on the couch. She informed everyone that I was being dramatic as usual and that they should realize that she had 3 children to support and so needed the money more. I questioned her about if Tommy's life was more important than her children. I was crazy for drawing similarities, she said. My mother made an effort to clarify that Sarah was their top priority as she had always required more assistance and had been more emotionally sensitive. My dad went on to say that they assisted Sarah because she lacked my strength and independence. My Aunt Susan questioned them about how they could afford to spend thousands on Sarah's beach mansion and still allow their grandson to die. My parents couldn't respond. Other family members began inquiring about the several occasions my parents and Sarah had taken out loans from them under the pretext of crises. Sarah became irate and said that I had no right to reveal her personal information. She claimed that if anyone learned about this circumstance, her children would suffer from trauma. I informed them that they were no longer my family. In order to purchase a beach property for Sarah, they witnessed the death of my son. I told them that their decisions had killed them, just as Tommy had died. Sarah began to yell that I was jealously attempting to ruin her life. She claimed that because our parents loved her more, I had always envied her. I banned their numbers after leaving their home. I was followed by several family members who promised to help me if I decided to file a lawsuit. Sarah and my parents have been blocked on social media by the majority of my cousins, but some relatives are emailing me to say that I went too far by disclosing Sarah's secret in public. They believe I ought to have dealt with it in private. James agrees with my decision to stop communicating with them, but he believes there was a better way for me to reveal the truth. I don't care anymore, but he is concerned about how this may impact our ties with our extended family. Instead of protecting their grandson's life, my parents decided to fund Sarah's opulent lifestyle, which is why my son is dead. Update. Since I revealed Sarah and my parents during the family dinner, a lot has transpired. Over the years, more relatives have come forward with tales of my parents' deceit and Sarah's manipulation. I'm more and more aware of their deceit with every new story. 3 days after the dinner, I received a call from my Aunt Linda. She sobbed as she informed me about last year's $30,000 loan to Sarah. According to Sarah, her oldest kid developed appendicitis and required emergency surgery. Because she didn't want another child to go through what Tommy had gone through, Linda spent all of her retirement funds to assist. Later, Linda learned that there was no operation. Sarah installed a pool and updated the kitchen at her beach house using the funds. The story of my cousin Emily was even worse. She visited my home last week and told me something that made me feel nauseous. Emily was engaged to Mark, Sarah's husband, 8 years prior. After graduating from college, Emily and Mark became engaged. They sent out invites, organized a lavish wedding, and Emily even purchased her own gown. Mark went missing 2 weeks prior to the wedding. He wrote a note stating that he wasn't prepared to get married. After having a breakdown, Emily required 2 years of therapy. She is aware of the reality now. While Mark was engaged to Emily, Sarah had been seeing him in secret for months. He was persuaded by Sarah to abandon Emily and follow her to Florida. My parents were well informed. They assisted Sarah and Mark in choosing their Florida home. 3 months after Mark's separation from Emily, they even went to their small, secret wedding. They were aware of Sarah's actions and watched Emily battle sadness the entire time. 2 more stories were then released. I was discovered on Facebook by Tom, Sarah's first husband. Sarah's previous marriage to Mark was unknown to me. Soon after graduating from college, Tom and Sarah were married and had a daughter. Sarah emptied their bank accounts and vanished when their daughter was 2 years old. She seized all of Tom's inheritance from his grandmother, along with $40,000 from their savings. Sarah informed everyone that she had to leave because Tom was abusive. Sarah's falsehoods cost Tom his job, his home, and almost their daughter's custody. In order to obtain child support for their now 15-year-old daughter, he had been looking for Sarah for years. Sarah's whereabouts were always known to my parents. They assisted Sarah in creating fictitious documents demonstrating that she was in danger from Tom and paid attorneys to contest Tom's custody claims. Everything became worse when James discovered something in our safe deposit box last week. Like they said they did for all their grandchildren, my parents set up a trust fund for Tommy when he was born. They committed to investing $1,000 each month until he became 18. There should have been more than $100,000 in the trust. We discovered records that demonstrated they had been moving all of the funds to Sarah's children's accounts. James continued searching through our documents and discovered further proof of their dishonesty. My parents were retired and on fixed incomes, so each time we filed for financial aid for Tommy's medical bills, they wrote letters to the hospital stating that they were unable to assist. However, their bank records reveal that they were simultaneously sending Sarah sizable sums. I was contacted over LinkedIn by my dad's secretary. According to her, my dad had been assisting Sarah with corporate funds, classifying the transfers as business costs. In order to demonstrate that Sarah was a business consultant for his insurance company, he fabricated paperwork. According to the secretary, he had sent more than $200,000 in business funds to Sarah throughout the previous 3 years. According to my mom's best friend, who also works at the same school, my mom has been embezzling money from the school's fundraising accounts in order to give it to Sarah. She changed the records to hide it. Each year, the school generated funds for the medical emergencies of its students. This fund was overseen by my mother, who also had access to every account. Since I blocked Sarah, she has been attempting to reach me from several phone numbers. She occasionally threatens to sue me for violation of privacy and defamation. At other times, she calls in tears and says that Mark is questioning her about her history and she wants my assistance. She said in her voicemail yesterday that if I didn't stop anyone from looking into her finances, she would tell everyone that I had abused Tommy. Yesterday, my parents issued a letter via their attorney. They said that if I agreed not to sue them, they would create a new trust fund for my future children. To demonstrate their good faith, they promised to contribute $200,000 right away. They also wanted me to sign a non-disclosure agreement in the letter, which said that I would never speak about Sarah's life or how they helped to sustain her financially. A number of family members have severed all communication with Sarah and my parents. After learning of what transpired, my dad's golfing pals have ceased inviting him to their weekly events. The other members of my mom's book club, who were primarily the parents of her students, no longer wanted to get out with her, so she had to dissolve it. The most challenging aspect is that pictures of Sarah's family traveling to upscale locations while Tommy was ill kept turning up. The same week that we were pleading with my parents to contribute to Tommy's last surgery, someone discovered photos of Sarah's family at Disney World. The matching outfits Sarah's children are wearing in the pictures cost more than what we had to buy to save my son's life. Second update. Our attorney discovered something that clarifies a lot of my parents' actions, particularly their strong preference for Sarah. Sarah is not their biological daughter, as we found out. At the age of 2, she was adopted. They didn't tell anyone, not even Sarah. While our lawyer was looking into the missing trust fund funds, the adoption documents surfaced. Sarah was adopted by my parents following my mother's 4 miscarriages. Because they were concerned that it would impact Sarah's feeling of family, they chose to keep the adoption a secret. Not even our grandparents were informed. In order to avoid being questioned about the unexpected arrival of a 2-year-old, they relocated to a different city immediately following the adoption. The attorney also discovered proof that my parents had assisted Sarah in her scam throughout the years. My parents hired someone $155,000 to fabricate transcripts indicating Sarah graduated with honors after she left college after 2 years. They had a business associate of my dad write fictitious work references for her. Sarah never worked anyplace. All of the jobs she claimed to have had throughout the years were fictitious. In order to obtain credit cards and loans, my parents assisted her in fabricating an identity. They obtained phony papers by using my dad's contacts at the insurance firm. Sarah obtained over $300,000 in loans from various banks using this fictitious name. My dad's business provided the funds that my parents used to make the payments. Sarah lost all control when our lawyer informed her about the adoption. She posted all of this on Facebook. She disclosed how my parents assisted her in stealing Emily's fiancé, hiding from her first husband, and concealing her credit card theft. She even acknowledged that she had made false claims regarding the abuse of her first spouse. Sarah shared images of text exchanges that demonstrated how my parents assisted her in fabricating a medical emergency so she could get family members to lend her money. She had a routine. She would choose a financially secure relative, fabricate a narrative about one of her children requiring medical care, and have my parents verify her account. In this way, they conned at least 7 different relatives. At last, my parents sobbed and told our lawyer everything. They have supported Sarah and her family with over $500,000 over the last 10 years. They borrowed funds from their retirement accounts, took out second and third mortgages on their home, and my dad even embezzled from the client accounts of his business. I was even more incensed by their response when the lawyer questioned them about why they chose to let Tommy die rather than assist us. They said that if they stopped providing Sarah money, they would be cut off from their grandkids. According to my dad, if the kids ever stopped supporting Sarah's lifestyle, she had threatened to vanish with them. My mother acknowledged that she was aware of Sarah's scheme to take Mark away from Emily. She claimed that Sarah had confided in her that she would stop at nothing to win Mark's affection. Rather than intervening, my mother assisted Sarah in setting up private sessions with Mark. Even the note that Mark left for Emily was written with her assistance. Our lawyer now works with Tom, Sarah's first husband. He has evidence that my parents assisted Sarah in fabricating accusations of domestic abuse against him. To fabricate medical records indicating injuries, they hired a physician. With the aid of these documents, Sarah was able to get restraining orders against Tom, which barred him from visiting his daughter for several years. When my dad's business learned about the stolen funds, an internal investigation was launched. He had been fabricating insurance policies and keeping the premiums, they found out. He used the funds to support Sarah and created policies for non-existent people. He was dismissed by the corporation and is facing criminal prosecution. Concerned about being linked to my dad's scam, a number of his business associates have severed their connections with him. After parents protested that their children were being taught by someone involved in fraud, my mother was forced to leave teaching early. Additionally, the school is looking into the disappearance of dollars from student activities funds. In order to cover their legal expenses, my parents had to sell their home. They could be charged with fraud, embezzlement, and aiding in the creation of fraudulent documents. For making fictitious police reports about her first husband, identity theft, and financial fraud, Sarah is under investigation. Update 3. Over the last 6 months, everything with my family has dramatically changed. In order to settle their legal debts, my parents had to sell their home and the majority of their belongings. They currently reside on the opposite side of town in a little one-bedroom apartment. My dad needs to repay $400,000 that he took from customer accounts after his company won their lawsuit against him. Unfortunately, no insurance firm will hire him, so he is now working as a night security guard. After Mark learned about Sarah's first marriage and all of her falsehoods, her life completely collapsed. Even more information about her past was discovered by the private investigator he hired. Prior to her first marriage, Sarah had another child from a previous relationship. She never mentioned this child to anyone and relinquished her parental rights. The fact that she had left 2 children behind before becoming his wife and father repulsed Mark. Mark obtained full custody of their 3 children after filing for divorce. The judge concurred that Sarah's past of deception and desertion made her an unfit mother. She is not even permitted to visit the kids unattended. Mark and the children returned to their hometown in Texas. He had to obtain a restraining order since Sarah kept creating fresh social media profiles to reach him. Tom, Sarah's first husband, won his appeal for retroactive child support. Sarah was ordered by the court to give him $150,000 plus interest for the years she was missing. They are seizing the meager fortune she received from our grandma last year since she's unemployed. Now 15, Tom's daughter won't talk to Sarah or my parents after finding out that they assisted in keeping her from her father. Because of the stolen fiancé event, my cousin Emily sued Sarah in civil court for mental anguish. Sarah and my parents planned the entire thing months in advance, according to old emails that Emily's lawyer discovered. Because Mark's family was wealthy, they specifically targeted him. Last month, the matter was resolved out of court, but as a condition of the deal, Sarah had to give Emily her beach house. James received an offer of employment in Colorado that had complete medical benefits and higher wages. To start over, we made the decision to relocate. We're keeping it quiet this time, but I'm 4 months pregnant. The only people who are aware of the pregnancy are my Aunt Linda and 2 cousins. We've made the decision to stop communicating with Sarah and my parents. Some family members are still attempting to persuade me to pardon my parents. They claim that my parents have learned their lesson and lost everything. I am constantly getting letters from Uncle Bob about how my parents miss us and cry during family get-togethers. However, I informed him that I don't care about their tears because their decisions caused my son to lose out on his entire life. Last week, Sarah was arrested for attempting to use her children's social security information to apply for new credit cards. She is being charged with identity theft. When she was in jail, she called me to seek assistance with bail money. I banned the phone number of the jail. The only positive outcome of this circumstance is the increased closeness of other family members. In Colorado, my Aunt Linda moved close to us to assist with the impending baby. My cousins have established a group chat where we encourage one another and communicate every day. Without Sarah and my parents, we are starting a new family. Every day I still miss Tommy. We talk about him a lot, and his photos are everywhere in our new home. However, I'm happy that my parents and Sarah's truth was revealed. At least they are no longer able to harm others with their falsehoods. Among all of this, the most difficult lesson I took away was that sometimes the people who ought to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the most. However, right now, my attention is on the future and creating a better life with the family members that genuinely care about us. My sister got my wife fired, but karma struck when her $2.5 million fraud scheme was exposed, leading to her downfall. Thelma, 35F, my sister, who is 32M, has always been fiercely competitive with everyone, particularly when it comes to professional accomplishments. Since she was a straight-A student who was accepted into a prominent college and immediately after graduation found a distinguished career, Thelma was always our parents' golden child. Thelma never forgot that I was a more typical student who took a few years to figure out what I wanted to do. Being the successful member of our family has become Thelma's entire identity. She is a senior manager at one of the leading IT businesses in our city. Her accomplishments are continuously praised by our parents, who also use her as an example for the rest of us to follow. She lives in a fancy home in the greatest area of town and earns a very decent living. Every family get-together becomes an opportunity to highlight her most recent bonus or promotion. 3 years ago, while both of us were speaking at a tech conference, I met my wife, Libby, 30F. Libby had the most amazing work ethic I had ever seen, and she was intelligent and motivated. She was from a very different family than ours. When she was 6 years old, her parents left Vietnam and took on several professions to support themselves. While maintaining stellar marks and eventually receiving her degree in computer technology, Libby had to work during high school and college to support her family. The thing that truly appealed to me about Libby was her humility in spite of her success. She never disparaged others or boasted about her achievements. Rather, she was constantly attempting to guide younger developers and make others successful. We bonded right away since we both enjoy coding and solving problems, and last year, after 2 years of dating, we were married in a modest ceremony. Thelma had never been fond of Libby. I initially assumed it was simply her customary aloofness toward strangers, but it soon became apparent that Thelma viewed Libby as a danger. Thelma would frequently make subtle jabs about how Libby was squandering her skills at a smaller company, despite the fact that she was leading the engineering department at her startup and producing creative work. That's cute, but at a real tech company like mine, or you should apply for a junior position at my company if you want to do actual important work, were some of the remarks she would make to break up Libby's employment stories. Our parents never mentioned Thelma's actions, and when I attempted to confront her about it, they blamed me of being overly sensitive and said that Thelma was only attempting to support Libby in her professional endeavors. Libby never took the bait or got into a fight with Thelma, and she always responded to her remarks with elegance. To Thelma's seeming annoyance, she would simply smile and shift the topic. When Libby received an amazing job offer from the same business where Thelma works, but in a different department, 6 months ago everything truly came to a head. Better income, more responsibility, and the opportunity to oversee significant initiatives that could significantly impact the industry made it Libby's ideal position. She would be in charge of financial technology integration across several divisions, which was Libby's area of expertise at her firm. Thelma usually dominated the conversation. So when we broke the news to her during a family dinner, she became extremely silent. Our parents were ecstatic, discussing how the sisters-in-law could get together for lunch and how wonderful it would be to have both of their daughters working for the same esteemed organization. Thelma merely shoved food around her plate and said something ambiguous about how hiring practices must be evolving. Libby was doing well when she started the job. She was already making strides toward simplifying some of their antiquated systems, and her team adored her. Every day, she would return home with excitement, sharing with me the difficulties she was facing and the advancements she was making. She was happier than I had ever seen her in her career. After only 2 weeks in her new position, Libby was abruptly called into HR and immediately let go. They said they had found that Libby had misrepresented her prior projects and employment experience on her resume. Libby was caught off guard. In her life, she had never told a lie. It didn't make sense because they had called all of her references and confirmed her prior job during the lengthy interview process. Libby was heartbroken. When she came home, she sobbed for hours, claiming she didn't comprehend what had transpired. HR refused to even look at her copies of all project material and employment records. Like criminals, they simply escorted her out of the building. I began looking into it since something didn't make sense. I requested a friend of mine who worked in IT at the company to investigate the situation because he owed me a favor. I was furious at what he found. Thelma had brought fake proof that Libby had forged some of her employment history to HR. In order to give the impression that Libby had misrepresented her position and accomplishments at her former employer, she had really produced fictitious emails and supporting paperwork. Thelma made no attempt to refute it when I challenged her about it. She stated that someone with Libby's past didn't belong at a prestigious company like theirs and that she was defending the company's brand. She blasted Libby for not being our kind of people, and expressed her frustration at seeing underqualified diversity candidates occupying unworthy positions. My sister's candid discussion of her preconceptions was something I had never heard her do before, and it sickened me. I expected our parents to be as appalled as I was when I told them everything. They said that rather than making a huge deal out of it, we should deal with it within the family. They stated that Thelma most likely didn't mean any damage and was simply anxious about her job. They advised Libby to simply look for new employment and move on, stating that there were many other organizations that would be better suited for someone with her experience. Karma caught up to Thelma last week. Her own supervisor found out that she had been fabricating reports to exaggerate the performance of her team. She was promptly fired. Now that she needs money to pay her mortgage and other payments until she gets a new job, she is frantically texting and calling me. It seems that she has already spent all of her savings on her opulent lifestyle. Our parents are placing a lot of pressure on me to do the right thing and help Thelma maintain her house because they believe that family comes first and that she's still your sister. They keep stressing that Thelma made a mistake but that she is family, while Libby is just an in-law. I declined. Just as she left Libby alone after purposefully ruining her career, I told Thelma she was on her own. Thelma broke down in tears and apologized profusely, claiming that I had been cruel and that she had made a mistake. However, I don't think she genuinely feels regret for what she did to Libby. She merely apologizes for needing assistance after being exposed for her own deceptions. Even though my sister might lose her house, am I the jerk for not helping her? Although it's not as good as the job she lost, Libby has since obtained another one. However, I'm still upset over Thelma's actions. I don't think I can ever forgive someone who intentionally wounded my wife because of their own prejudices and anxieties, despite our parents' constant insistence that I'm being too harsh and that I need to forgive my family. Update. Since my last post, things have become a lot messier. Thelma decided to start what I can only characterize as a smear campaign against Libby across our entire extended family after I declined to assist her with her financial issues. She seems to be attempting to change the past such that she is the victim in this whole situation. Thelma brought a wholly made-up account of what happened to our extended family. In fact, she claimed that it was Libby who had been deceitful and manipulative. She falsely claimed that Libby had applied to her department on purpose, it was a whole other division, and had started attempting to appropriate Thelma's projects and claim credit for her work right away. Thelma stated that she had to notify HR of Libby's access to private documents pertaining to her team's projects in order to safeguard both the business and herself. She presented Libby as a corporate spy who had married me in order to gain access to Thelma's position inside the corporation. She even implied that, knowing that I was Thelma's brother, Libby had singled me out at the tech conference 3 years prior. In actuality, Libby was unaware of Thelma's existence until after we had been dating for a few months. The majority of our extended family seemed to be fully believing Thelma's falsehoods, which is the saddest part. Once a huge fan of Libby and a constant praise of her cuisine, our Aunt Linda now refuses to even look at her. Uncle Bob, who works in tech recruiting, even called me to warn me about how Libby might be using me to go up the corporate ladder. Our cousins have been making ambiguous remarks on social media about snakes in the family and gold diggers who destroy families. They have been phoning and emailing me nonstop, accusing me of betraying my own people for an outsider who attempted to destroy my sister's career. They don't seem to care that Thelma was fired for her own dishonesty. They have concluded that Libby must have planned that as retaliation as well. It's truly amazing the mental acrobatics they're employing to paint Thelma as the victim in all of this. My parents, who before at least seemed to be impartial, are now completely on Thelma's side. In fact, my mother had the audacity to tell me that she should have seen Libby was troubled from the moment she met her. Along with other blatantly racist remarks that sickened me, she said things like, people from her background often have different values about honesty. Go back to her own community where she wouldn't cause problems for our family, my dad advised Libby. Our youngest sister, Amy, 28F, is the only one who has defended Libby, and her revelation has altered my entire understanding of Thelma. At last, Amy broke down and shared with us a story that occurred 5 years ago. Shortly after graduating, she had applied for a junior job at Thelma's company. She aced every interview and had outstanding credentials. Her application was abruptly denied because of character issues, even though the team wanted to recruit her. Amy learned that Thelma had also gone to HR at the time with unfounded claims that Amy had cheated in college. It seems that Thelma had fabricated emails from Amy's college to bolster her allegations. Thelma had threatened to use her connections to blacklist Amy in the industry if she ever told anyone, so even though Amy was distraught, she kept silent about it. Amy was so disturbed by the incident that she ultimately accepted a job in a totally other industry. Thelma lost all control when Amy told her account in our family group chat and included screenshots of Thelma's threatening communications from that time. At 11 p.m., she stormed into Amy's flat, banging on the door and yelling that Amy was a traitor who was attempting to ruin her life. Amy claims she had no idea what secrets Thelma was referring to, but she was threatening to reveal all of her secrets. Additionally, Thelma promised to ensure Amy never again worked in the city. Amy had to call the police to get Thelma off the property because she was so scared. It's terrifying to hear my sister sound so insane after she captured a portion of Thelma's breakdown on her phone. Thelma was even more incensed after the cops warned her about harassment. Our family is now utterly divided. Our parents continue to support Thelma, claiming that Amy must have misinterpreted what transpired 5 years ago and that she is merely envious of Thelma's accomplishments. In an attempt to portray Amy and I as permanently jealous troublemakers, who are just out to harm poor, successful Thelma, they are accusing us of being disloyal and ungrateful for banding together against our sister when she is already down. They have even begun bringing up all of our childhood transgressions. I've begun compiling all of the proof of Thelma's behavior, including the police report from her breakdown, the testimonies from coworkers who saw her behavior, the phony emails she made about Libby, and the threatening text she sent to Amy. After reviewing everything, the legal staff at Libby's new workplace believes we have a solid case against Thelma and her old employer for defamation and wrongful termination. However, my parents are now threatening to disown Amy and me if we destroy our sister's life over a misunderstanding. They claim that if we don't drop everything and help Thelma get back on her feet, they will write us both out of their will and that pursuing legal action would demonstrate that we were never truly family. Since she doesn't feel safe in her own apartment, Amy is currently staying with us. Despite her own trauma from everything that has transpired, Libby has been a tremendous support system for her. Even though I'm more convinced than ever that confronting Thelma is the right thing to do, it still hurts to see my family fall apart like this. Numerous unpleasant facts about my family have come to light as a result of the entire scenario, which I suppose I always knew existed but never wanted to confront. I used to believe that Thelma's will to excel and her competitive nature were simply acts of ambition, but now I realize that they are a much more sinister and damaging trait. Update. Everything we believed to be true about Thelma's behavior has been totally disproved. Rachel, a former coworker of Thelma's, contacted Libby via LinkedIn last week. We were all surprised by what Rachel, Thelma's assistant manager for the previous 2 years, disclosed. Although it was undoubtedly a contributing factor, Rachel claims that Thelma's sabotage of Libby was motivated by more than just professional jealousy or prejudice. The true cause was much darker. Libby's new position would have provided her direct access to financial records and system logs, which may have revealed Thelma's years of falsifying the books, despite her best efforts to conceal her own illegal acts at the company. Documentation from Rachel demonstrated that since Thelma was promoted to senior manager, she had been routinely manipulating the performance metrics for her department. To make it appear as though her team was earning millions of dollars in fictitious revenue, she had set up shell businesses, faked contracts, and created phony client accounts. For years, she had been using these fictitious accounts to embezzle company revenue, taking a portion of the phony contracts and transferring it to her personal offshore accounts. Thelma went into a frenzy when Libby started working for the company and was given the responsibility of auditing and integrating all of the financial technology systems. Given her reputation for being meticulous and her experience with system integration, Libby would have unavoidably found out about Thelma's department's anomalies. Thelma fabricated the CV fraud narrative just 2 weeks into Libby's job, which is why she acted so swiftly to fire her. In reality, Rachel had been compiling proof of Thelma's deception for months, but because of Thelma's industry ties, she had been too afraid to come out. Rachel ultimately made the decision to take action after witnessing how Thelma had ruined Libby's career in order to defend herself. She had amassed records of strange money transfers, screenshots of phony client accounts, and copies of false contracts that all pointed directly to Thelma. We gave the police and the company's internal inquiry team all of this material. Thelma had embezzled more than $2.5 million in the previous 3 years, according to the probe. Her activities constituted securities fraud since the fictitious performance figures she disclosed had also affected the company's stock prices. However, the most heartbreaking discovery concerned our parents. When the detectives began tracking down the funds, they found that sizable sums had been going into accounts that belonged to our parents. They eventually acknowledged that they had been aware of Thelma's fraudulent conduct over the previous year after being presented with this evidence. Not only did they know, but they had been actively assisting her in concealing the funds. They had established offshore accounts and produced a paper trail that made the stolen money appear to be genuine investments by using their legal connections. They asserted that since Thelma was the one who stole the money, they had not technically committed any crimes and were only defending their daughter. I was disgusted by their attitude when I questioned them about their involvement in all of this. They said that because Libby claims to care so much about family, she should understand their actions. They even attempted to claim that Libby's assistance in paying her parents' tuition expenses was equivalent to helping Thelma steal millions of dollars. They didn't seem to see the difference between assisting to cover up enormous fraud and working honest jobs to support your family. Their attitude was the worst. They were just sorry they were found, not sorry for what they had done. In fact, according to my mother, none of this would have surfaced if Libby had been more understanding about her place and had discreetly departed the company when Thelma requested it. They continue to blame Libby for everything, claiming that her rigid job choices pushed them to take extreme steps. The involvement of our parents has upset Amy. She had always believed that our parents were simply too forgiving of Thelma and that she was the only toxic member of the family. Amy's entire opinion of our family has been completely destroyed by learning that they were complicit in her misdeeds. She can hardly sleep and has been experiencing anxiety episodes. Thelma is currently facing criminal charges from the firm for fraud and embezzlement. In addition, they are looking into a number of her close co-workers who may have participated in the plot. Although our parents are being investigated for their part in concealing the stolen funds, they have not yet been charged. Thelma is no longer there at all. She stopped answering all messages and cleaned out her home in the middle of the night. My parents say they don't know where Thelma might have gone, but the police are searching for her. I don't believe them at all, considering how they've previously assisted her. Third update. Our family has experienced pain as well as justice in this story's last chapter. 2 weeks ago, Thelma was apprehended for attempting to enter Canada using forged documents. Our parents, as we thought, had assisted her in hiding in several places during her attempt to escape the country. In order to escape a longer term, she ultimately accepted a plea bargain. In addition to 3 years of supervised release, she will spend 2 years in federal prison for embezzlement and securities fraud. Thelma's scam was far more extensive than we first believed, according to the company's inquiry. Since she was initially promoted to management 6 years ago, she had been stealing money and falsifying statistics. In order to hide her tracks, she had also been blackmailing a number of lower-level staff members, threatening to destroy their careers in the same way that she had done to Amy and Libby. All of this has been made possible by the tremendous assistance of Libby's new employer. Following the public revelation of Thelma's transgressions, Libby received a formal apology from her previous employer along with an offer to resume her job. They have given her a sizable payout for wrongful termination in addition to returning her to her previous position with a promotion and full back pay. More significantly, they are putting new rules into place to stop discrimination against workers from immigrant backgrounds and HR fraud. Our parents are dealing with the fallout on their own. Their cooperation with investigators helped them avoid criminal charges, but their role in Thelma's crimes is now well known in our town. Since the partners didn't want to run the risk of their reputation being damaged by association, they were compelled to leave their legal practice. They no longer hold the same position in all of the social circles they once controlled, and the majority of their pals have turned away. Rather than expressing regret, they have intensified their efforts to place the blame on others. Before Thelma was sentenced, they even attempted to write a letter to the judge accusing Libby of manipulating circumstances to accuse Thelma out of jealousy. Given the strong proof of Thelma's culpability, the judge was not impressed. Additionally, they attempted to accuse Amy and I of plotting with Libby to embezzle Thelma's money and blame her, but this desperate attempt clearly failed. Amy has begun to put her life back together. While she searches for a new job away from our parents' influence, she has temporarily moved in with us. The business has also extended an offer to her, admitting that Thelma's bogus accusations were the reason behind her dismissal 5 years prior. After years of Thelma's manipulation and our parents' toxic behavior, she is finally receiving therapy. Her gradual recovery of confidence and realization that none of this was her fault is truly remarkable. Libby and I have stopped communicating with my parents and Thelma altogether. Our lawyer has made it plain that any attempt to get in touch with us will be viewed as harassment, and we have blocked them everywhere. Building our own family with individuals who share our values of integrity and support for one another is our main goal. After seeing all the proof, a number of our cousins who at first thought Thelma was lying have apologized, and we're carefully mending our ties with those who appear to be truly sorry. Some family members continue to maintain that we ought to have kept matters within the family and protected Thelma. Last week, my aunt called and said that we are bad people for allowing Thelma to go to prison and that real families stick together no matter what. However, Thelma's total lack of regret, even in court, has only served to reinforce our decision. She merely expressed regret for trusting the wrong people, specifically Amy and Libby, to reveal her wrongdoings. We have learned from this entire experience that sometimes the family you choose matters more than the family you are born into. Instead of the poisonous allegiance and corruption that Thelma and our parents attempted to impose on us, Libby, Amy and I are forging a new sort of family founded on integrity, respect and genuine support. My sister thought she needed to go to the ER for her period. What began as a simple babysitting job turned into a scary situation. Original post, August 22, 2024. Okay, so I, 19M, am babysitting my little sister, 15F, while our parents are on a trip internationally. It's like a completely different time zone and the signal sucks. They get home in like 6 days. But we are both pretty self-sufficient and felt like it would be fine, and my parents left us food and money and stuff. We've been Gucci for a whole week so far. Anyway, this morning she got her period while we were just sitting playing video games and she got blood all over the couch, so I paused the game while she took care of it and put on a tampon and didn't make a big deal of it. I was trying to be nice because I know it can make girls cranky and it hurts and stuff, so I got snacks and a blanket and whatever and we kept playing. Well, like maybe 40 minutes later she freaked out because she bled on the couch again and I'm like, did you put the thing on wrong or what? So she changed again and I even helped her clean the blood off the couch this time and I figured she'd use a bigger feminine thing. NBD. Well, like 30 minutes after we start playing again she pauses and goes to the bathroom and I hear her scream, so I run over there thinking there's a spider or something, but she came out holding like this chunk. It was like a chunk of blood. But looking at it I'm like, shit, maybe that's an organ? Like, is that your kidney? But she was like, no, it's a clot. And she was freaking out about it. Which, yeah, it was gross. It was like the size of a hacky sack. So I'm like, okay, well, go flush your clothes. Anyway, she cleans herself up, but then she said she doesn't want to play anymore, and I'm like, okay. So she spent an hour on the couch with her face all scrunched up doing yoga breathing and telling me her cramps were the worst ever. So I gave her Tylenol, but she wouldn't take it because she said she feels like she's gonna throw up. I brought her water and juice and warmed up that gel thing you stick on your stomach, you know? So I was trying to help. Well, then she says, oh no, and she gets up and goes to the bathroom, and as she's walking she's got blood going down her leg. She yelled for me from the bathroom and I went in there and she's sitting there and I hear this plopping sound and there's more of those chunks. Like maybe 2 of them? And she says, I think we need to go to the ER. I'm like, why? And she tells me this is more blood than she's ever had and she doesn't feel good. But periods are supposed to suck, right? And she wouldn't take the Tylenol either, so she didn't really try to manage it at home. So then she started yelling at me, telling me I have to take her because she can't drive, but I'm pretty sure our parents will kill me if I take her to the ER for her period. Is that a thing? She's sitting in the shower now because she said she thought the warm water would feel good and she was sick of bleeding on stuff and it's more comfortable than the toilet. I asked her if she just needs a bigger tampad and she told me to STFU, so she's not even communicating with me at this point. I've asked her a few times if she's okay there and she tells me I'm bleeding out. Mason, what do you think? So like she's not unconscious. IDK, I don't know anything about this, but I also know she hates blood and flips out about any minor cut too. Is going to the ER because of a period a thing? Can you bleed too much? I thought there was only a certain amount of blood in the vagina every month. I feel like she'd be more comfortable at home anyway if she'd just take the Tylenol. IDK, what to do? My sister is like average teenage girl height, pretty skinny because she's a ballerina and doesn't eat meat. She takes Accutane for her pimples. I'm not sure if there's other stuff that's important. She's had her period for like a year now, I'm pretty sure. Maybe more. She takes Flintstone gummy vitamins sometimes, like the ones in the purple jar. And she's obsessed with Celsius energy drinks. She wears contacts and she had her wisdom teeth removed 2 months ago. IDK, I want her to be okay and stuff, but I'm not sure there is a good choice. Help? Relevant comments. Is there any chance of pregnancy miscarriage? I mean, I don't think so. She doesn't have a boyfriend, and when I asked she told me to fuck off, so probably not. Tampons or pads? I asked and she said she was using a tampon first, but after that she used both to prevent leaks. So both, I guess. She said always with wings and Tampax Sport. Commenter, Doc. If she's saturating more than one tampon in an hour, she should be seen. OOP, she said she was soaking both of them, so I guess we are going. Mini updates and comments. 30 minutes later. OOP, okay, she's throwing some extra clothes and shit in a bag. I'm trying to think what my mom would do, so I brought water bottles, sunscreen, and snacks. And something to do. Commenter, well, you don't need sunscreen at the hospital. Extra clothes. Maybe a water bottle, snacks are good. Insurance card? And call your parents. Didn't they leave another adult's number for you to call in an emergency? Do you have another relative? OOP, oh shit, yeah, I gotta tell my parents. Fuck. I mean, no they didn't, but I think it's because I'm an adult. Any other adults? OOP, all our relatives live on the other side of the country. But like she has friends and they have moms? But she wasn't into the idea of asking them. Commenter, let this be a lesson to you. If a woman says this is wrong, this doesn't seem normal, about her own body, try listening to her and not making her jump through hoops convincing you something is wrong while you ask the internet for advice. Just listen to her. OP. Yeah, I was being a dick. The sunscreen. Yeah, LOL, I didn't think about the fact that it's inside, just like my mom always yelling about sunscreen. OOP is encouraged to bring a comfort item for his sister. Okay, this makes me feel good because I packed her Squishmallow and I was kind of afraid to tell her I did that in case she thought it was embarrassing or gross. I sent my mom a text. 1 hour later, in response to someone telling him to bring a bowl in case she vomits. Nah FR, I wish I would have read this BC. She threw up in the car twice. She told me to stop driving like Stevie Wonder and I swear I was laughing so hard I almost had to pull over. Commenter, it sounds like she is really comfortable with you. I mean, she let you help her clean up and showed you clots. And you didn't get all, I'm a guy, don't show me. Frankly, you're acting better than my husband would when it comes to helping. He'd never look at my blood or think about bringing snacks. So you are doing pretty good and she might not feel she needs another female. OP. I mean, if I acted grossed out, she'd tell me to grow up. LOL. My sister doesn't deal with stupid dudes. But yeah, we're close and it's just blood. So? About 2 hours after OG post. Okay, we got here. She threw up a couple times in the car, but she said she's good now. We walked in and she was like dripping down her leg again, and they saw that at the desk and maybe how fucking freaked I looked. LOL, and took her back pretty much right away. Commenter. Adding to this, because questions about her sexual history and habits are definitely going to be asked, big bro, make it clear to her that if she wants you to leave, you will. If she wants you to stay, I would make it clear to her that you're not going to snitch on her about anything she says. If it's something that needs to be brought up to your parents, the docs can do that. It's not your job to tell your parents her answers. If you can't make her that promise, tell her you can't be in the room. OP. Nah, I'm not saying shit if I find anything out. She caught me smoking weed on the roof 2 years ago and still hasn't ratted. LOL. About 1 hour 10 minutes later, 3 from OG post. Okay, so she's getting Zofran and fluids and they're gonna do an ultrasound in the room here. So far we know she's not pregnant and her labs weren't great. Hemoglobin was 6.8. Editor's note, that's not good. Normal for women is 12. 16. See here? That's basically the one I remember. She said to tell everyone thank you for the advice and stuff. She also said she feels okay, just really tired. Commenter, the tube sounds like a catheter. They may want a clean urine sample. The excessive bleeding can contaminate a urine sample and affect certain test results. OP. Oh, yeah, okay. They said they wanted a urine sample, but I was thinking why can't she just pee in a cup? About 1 hour, 20 minutes later. Alright, the ultrasound was normal. She's being admitted. They want to test her for bleeding and clotting disorders now, and they're going to give her some blood. They asked if I know my blood type, which I don't, but I'm not sure why it matters. Sister is B+ though. Commenter 1, I mean, tampad's a good way of saying, tampon or pad. Commenter 2, I agree, this is a useful neologism. OP. Thanks. OOP. See, I'm not a dumbass, I'm just inventing new terms. Commenter. You have properly unmounted your foot, so don't be afraid to ask questions now. It's much better to ask questions so you don't have to worry or freak out about things you don't know or don't understand, than to drive yourself mad with worry about something that might not warrant that worry or leaves you with unanswered questions. Best of luck to you and your sis. Was she happy you packed her squishmallow? Oopie. Yeah, she's sleeping on the squishmallow like a pillow run and told me it's the only reason she forgives me lol. That's a good idea though. When she wakes up I'll ask her. Commenter. If she gets admitted, you may want to consider making a trip home to pick up any comfort items either of you two need, like a book, laptop or blanket. But only if your sister feels comfortable with that. Oopie. So she packed clothes and I packed her squishmallow and our switches so we would have stuff to do. But she didn't even want me to get up to go pee, so I don't think she wants me to leave lol. She's asleep now though. Commenter. Definitely not the worst way to have to spend time in a hospital lol. Hope she turns out okay. Though I'm extremely curious about what the root cause is, and if you both feel comfortable sharing I'd love to know. OOP. Yeah, she said she doesn't care as long as I don't post any pics of her because she said she looks like 2024 Amanda Bynes and Britney Spears combined lol. Commenter. For future reference, you can call your doctor's office, or an advice nurse, with stuff like this. They will ask you a bunch of questions about what's going on and tell you what to do. OOP. Yeah, I was googling do you go to the ER for a bad period, and that's how I found the subreddit lol, but if something ever happens again that's probably a better bet. 7 hours later, about 12 from OG post. We both slept. Got a hold of our parents. My mom is looking for flights back home. Sister is feeling a lot better at this point. They gave her medicine to stop the bleeding. I wasn't expecting this to blow up the way it did, so there's no way I'll be able to answer everyone. She's doing okay though. Should know more about the CT soon. Commenter. Mate, I grew up with a shitty big brother and even now as adults I know he couldn't do half the job you've done of taking care of your little sis. You have restored my faith in humanity, and big bros. Glad to see the night was uneventful and that you got hold of your parents. And whatever you do, don't forget to reapply your sunscreen often. OOP. Man, she changed my name in her phone to SPF. I'm never living this shit down lol. 1.5 hours later, 13.5 from OG post. Alright, her vitals now are 101/65 and 80. So better. 6 hours later, 19 from OG post. CT was good too. They're pretty sure she has a blood disorder. They're just waiting on the results of it. I guess when she had her wisdom teeth out she bled more than she was supposed to, but I didn't know that before. So yeah, just waiting on that for now, but they don't think the issue is her uterus or whatever. Commenter. Just wanted to also mention that I think your post has become the #1 post to have ever been on with the most engagement ever. OOP. JFC, I'm kind of embarrassed lol. I'm glad this is anonymous. 8 hours later, 27 hours from OG post. Alright, I'm gonna try here instead of a post and hopefully be more covert lol, but could someone that knows about it tell me about type 2 von Willebrand's? Like the blood disorder? Because the internet says everything from like it's mild to it's life-threatening and I just want to know more about it and like how it affects day-to-day life and stuff. I appreciate the help with my sister before too. It's cool you guys just do this. Comments on another sub. OOP. Yeah, it got scary fast. It was crazy. But like no one has ever brought up taking her to the ER for it before. So IDK, I thought maybe she was scared because our mom wasn't there to make her feel better and I don't know anything about it. Update 1. Same post. Probably late August 23rd, the following day from OG post. Update. Alright, so I guess I was posting updates in the comments, but it's better here. Anyway, so, my sister is okay. She had some scans that were all fine and they don't think she has fibroids or tumors or anything like that. She's feeling a little better but still staying here at least another day. Our mom and dad are flying home tomorrow now. My mom was pissed I texted her instead of calling at first lol. Already had someone try to find me on Insta, so like if you know me or her, no you don't lol. She doesn't want this going around school or whatever, so don't do it for at least 3 years lol. She's cool with me updating through without her name or whatever. Also our parents don't know about this either. IDK, I feel like we should wait until it's been a few years to tell them too so they don't kill me lol. She's gonna hold this shit over my head forever lol. Anyway, they think she has a blood disorder that makes her not clot right. I'm not 100% sure how it works because she had big clots. But they said they're pretty sure that's what's going on because her PTT took longer than normal to clot. They're waiting on von Willebrand, SP, testing to come back, but they think she has type 2 probably. Gonna Google that tonight. BCIDK, what that is, and I've never heard of it, so I guess if any of the doctors know what that is or if this sounds like it, LMK. Yeah, I wasn't expecting this to blow up like this, LOL. I thought this was just like doctors answering questions like a helpline. But my sister said thank you for everyone telling me to take her and she's okay. Update 2. Same post, probably same day as previous update. Or soon after update again. They confirmed it's von Willebrand, IDK if I'll ever spell that right. Anyway, it's genetic I guess, so they want me to get tested too, but like obviously I've never had periods and I've never had surgery, so it wouldn't be as obvious. There's still more testing, like more specific to the type. But anyway, sister is good and we have an answer. She's gonna talk to a hematologist next week about what that means and stuff. Update 3, same post. August 29th, 2024, 1 week from OG post. New update. So if I also have von Willebrands. So does our mom. I've always bruised a lot and got super bad nosebleeds, but like I was also a dumbass kid teen who thought life was an audition for Jackass, so I didn't think it was weird, LOL. Anyway, we're all about to be real familiar with hematology and my mom is pissed. She's been told some women just bleed more her whole life, LOL. Guess my mom and sister weren't just exaggerating when they would say they were bleeding out. So yeah, IG, if you're a girl reading this and you bleed as much as my sister, you should see a doctor. Hopefully no one gets gaslit like my mom did, but yeah. Here's a public apology for being ignorant on what y'all actually go through. BC, I thought you could only bleed so much a month. Fully willing to admit how fucking stupid that was, lol. OOP's second post, August 29th, 2024, same day as update 3. Hi, so it's me again, 19M, apparently not that smart, questioning my career goals as a teacher. Anyway, my sister was on her period and thought she needed to go to the ER, and she actually did. I've got another question now, but first, thank you to everyone who answered my first post and educated me because she was in rough shape. Except for the girl who suggested drinking whole milk. Even I'm not that fucking stupid, WTF. Anyway, my sister has von Willebrand's disease, type 2. My mom and I also have it apparently. My mom just got gaslit for years about how much she bled, and it took my sister almost dying for us to all get diagnosed like TF. Anyway, I play in a recreational rugby league. Gonna have to pay dues soon, and I don't want to be out the money if I'm gonna get told I shouldn't play anymore, because it's a contact sport, but I don't see a hematologist for 5 weeks since I'm not urgent, LOL. So was wondering if any of the doctors know if I'm gonna get told I probably shouldn't play rugby anymore. I also like rock climbing. Is that gonna be out? Should I learn chess or crochet or something? LOL. Thanks again. Relevant comments. Commenter, if you aren't confirmed yet, don't play contact sports right now until at least you get testing. Read that paper as it has a decent list of other sports activities you can do more safely. You do not need to live in a bubble. OOP. Okay. Yeah, it's confirmed I have it, but I don't know the types and letters and stuff. But yeah, I guess I'm gonna go learn how to play snooker then, LOL. Thanks, commenter. I'm a lurker here because I'm not a doctor. But I'm a teacher, and I do remember your post. Teaching is a lovely career, and the profession would benefit from someone as compassionate as you. OOP. LOL. One thing is for sure, no students will get sunburned on my watch. Commenter, thank you so much for this update. Not only is it interesting, but it furthers all of our professional knowledge base when we are able to hear how things turned out. Good luck to you and your family. And I'm glad that your mom's medical issues have finally been validated. That's huge. OP. Oh yeah, I mean she's in her 40s. She'll kill me if I say exactly how old though, lol. So like I can't believe she's been suffering for 30-something years. She said she's about to write a big "I told you so" to every doctor who ever told her to get used to it. Commenter, dead serious, no pun intended. You should take up comedy. The ones that are the funniest are the ones that don't understand how funny they are. I'm glad your sister is okay, and I hope you're good too. Oh yeah, I'm totally good. Thanks, man. Showed this to my sister and she said, tell them you're already insufferable as it is, the last thing you need is an audience. Savage. LOL. Commenter, you'll know more after your consultation. There are different types of von Willebrands, so what applies to your sister and your mom will not necessarily apply to you. I'm glad you guys got to the bottom of it, and I'm extremely disheartened to hear that your mother was gaslit her entire life about her symptoms. There's not really an excuse from the medical community for that, and I'm sorry. OOP. Hey, thanks. It's good to know it might not be the same. Honestly, I'm surprised I made it this far without my brain bleeding because I was the poster child for ADHD, LOL. One more sunscreen comment. My dads have been calling me banana boats since they got back. RIP any game I had, LOL. Final fun comment. Commenter, please accept this version of an award because there's no way I'm paying for them through here, but dude, the sunscreen. I feel like this should be as well known on Reddit as the poop knife. IDK what a poop knife is, but I'm honored LOL. My boyfriend wants more intimacy, but it's exhausting me. How do I talk to him about it and find a balance? Original post. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years now. He is my first relationship and even my first kiss. We met at university during activities, became friends and then started dating. He is so polite and kind and also really sweet and smart as well. We can talk about our common interests and hobbies for hours on end. Since I was a virgin in the relationship, he was not. We took it slow and only had sex when I was ready, which was about 8 months after we became a couple. After that we had sex about once every 1 or 2 weeks, depending on if we found the time during our studies and if we were exhausted. Sometimes during exam time we had it once a month or every 5 weeks. But slowly he started to initiate more and more. At first I didn't mind and loved the attention he was giving me. I felt attractive and beautiful, which helped my body image issues a lot. Soon it turned into him asking for it every single day, sometimes twice a day during weekends or if we have a slow day with little work and studies. A month ago we went on a vacation together and he basically jumped on me as soon as we got into our hotel room. We barely got to do anything as he wanted to have sex 2 if not 3 times a day. I came back so exhausted from the vacation. I even started saying no to him eating me out, or role play or switching in position, just to get it over with sooner. At this point sex does nothing for me anymore. The mere action and physical stimulation feels enjoyable, yes, but just sex without anything else just isn't worth the time or effort for me. I need a story and emotion with it, lots of dirty talk and role-playing and some hot situations. I know that takes time and effort to prepare, but it gets me going wildly. But even if I could have that every day I wouldn't want it. It's literally physically too exhausting. Also I feel like too much sex kinda destroys the magic. I know that he takes a lot emotionally and sexually out of sex. It's making him feel loved and desired and I don't want to take it from him, but I actually caught myself don't doing any makeup anymore and not wearing tight or short clothing but baggy ones instead to maybe deter him from wanting sex so much. TLDR, my boyfriend started initiating sex more and more. I find it exhausting and can't take it anymore. How do I negotiate fewer sexual encounters without making him feel unloved? Update. I spend a lot of time reading through everyone's replies and looking inwards about how I feel. I gathered my thoughts and spent a few days making a list of what I wanted to say when we had the big conversation. On a weekend when we had planned to spend the day together, I sat him down and told him the following points. I love him to the moon and back and want to show him that I love him, make him feel desired, loved and appreciated, but having so much sex with such frequency is physically exhausting to me, which causes me to avoid sex and even sex acts I enjoy because I don't have enough energy and motivation to do it. This also causes me to orgasm not as often anymore. I also need time to physically recover before it may even start to become painful. I feel like sex has become the single defining aspect of our relationship and many other parts like doing activities together, romantic dates, just talking and cuddling have taken a backseat. I also feel exhausted emotionally and underappreciated from giving as much as I can, which I gladly do for the people I love, while little comes back from the other side of the relationship. I then proceeded to explain the things I like during sex and what makes me go wild, hoping to show him that I still want to have sex with him. I also made a few more compliments just to keep the vibe positive and because I meant it. He reacted pretty well, all things considered. He listened and let me finish, but asked for a little time to think about it. Obviously I gladly agreed. We spend the rest of the day together without him initiating once. At the end of the day he said that he wants me to enjoy sex just as much as he does and that he loves me. I was really hopeful for the next week and a half. We spent our time together like usual and he asked for sex about 1/2 as often as before our talk. We even had days without sex at all. He also started to ask, "Do you want to have sex with me?" Instead of physically initiating like he did before, like touching me somewhere, hugging me from behind and similar things. He also stopped asking for pictures of me and when he did it were just selfies. I was so happy that I even took the initiative once and he seemingly loved it when I asked for sex. Then one day he sat me down with a stern look and said that he hated what this relationship has turned into. To him it feels like we are now just roommates or platonic friends instead of lovers. He told me that the one time I initiated after he was overjoyed to finally fuck me again, his heart was broken because I suddenly wasn't as submissive as usually. I asked to be eaten out and was on top with some more dominant dirty talk, and that all of that is not what he signed up for. He doesn't want to walk on eggshells waiting for me when I'm finally in the mood, but has what he deserves in the relationship. Basically he gave me an ultimatum. Either we return to how it was before the talk starting right now or he leaves me. Guess who doesn't have a boyfriend anymore? I spent the last few days bawling my eyes out and eating lots of ice cream and watching some shitty shows. What he said hurt me a lot and I do not love him anymore, but still the feeling of loss and sadness is all too real. He was my first relationship and for the past 2 years he was my entire world. No, I have to gather up the broken shards he left behind. TLDR, I took your advice and talked with him about my feelings. He pretended to be okay with it for a while and then left me after demanding more sex again. OOP added more info in the comments. Comment 1 I have an update if you want more information. I have a pretty high libido as well and I love good, sensual sex, and I want it quite often as I can go multiple times a week. But it was so often that we basically didn't do anything else besides it and he was emotionally checked out when the possibility of sex wasn't on the table. It was so much that I was physically uncomfortable. Not to mention his really bad behavior once I told him I wanted a break sometimes. I had difficulties saying no, because I wanted to make him feel loved that way until I realized that he just wants to take everything he wants from me without giving any emotional connection, romance or care for me as a person. I hate that people throw around this sexual incompatibility argument, because if he said he wanted someone he can fuck at least 2 a day anyway he likes and I can't and don't want to do that would be one thing. But he shouted at me, demanded we do it how he likes it and that I apologize for ruining everything by voicing my concerns for my well-being. He also said that he deserves to just take everything he wants from me. So please keep that in mind when you do your judgment. Yes, we are not together anymore. I cut him off after his scary tantrum. Comment 2 Thank you for your empathy and for the added context. I know that my update gave more information, but that's also because I didn't see a lot of the stuff he did to me and didn't do for me after that tantrum. Until that point I wanted to give everything to him, because I was head over heels for him, until he showed me that he didn't feel that way back. I get it. I like sex just as much as the next gal. It's just that I have a pretty broad spectrum of frequency I would be okay with depending on what my partner feels like. Sex once a week or 2 weeks? Totally fine as long as the other intimacy is fulfilled. Sex every other day. Great as well as long as it's an equal relationship and we both get what we want and non-sexual intimacy isn't pushed to the side, which sadly happened to me. In the end I not only felt really sore and exhausted, but also used and reduced my body. If we broke up because of sexual incompatibility that would still hurt but we could part ways amicably, this way he just hurt me for no reason. Comment 3. I get that sexual incompatibility can be a huge deal breaker for people but firstly it's not like we suddenly were not having any sex anymore. In those 10 days between our 2 conversations we still had sex about 5, 6 times, plus making out, plus some other sexual stuff besides full-on PIV. Also it's the way he treated me. He shouted at me, demanded we return to normal by having sex as often as he wants again, no matter my feelings and with me being submissive. He also demanded an apology and an apology session, so much could be inferred. But before all that for the last weeks and months he left me emotionally starved. He only looked out for his sexual gratification while I had to cherish the few little drops of romance, friendship and companionship. When it didn't involve sex or could lead to sex he was kinda emotionally distant. Cute dates, cuddling and intimacy without sexuality and hobbies together was few and far in between. I don't fault him for not wanting sex, I fault him for how he treated me and how little he was able to compromise. My wife got bored with me and secretly called her ex to come and F her. This is how I uncovered everything. Hello everyone, I've been lurking on this topic for over a year but I can't keep reading and need some advice on my predicament. I would welcome any feedback. I'm 35 years old. And my 31-year-old wife stopped having any intimacy with me about 6 months ago and I'm not sure what to do. We have 2 boys, one is 3 years old and the other is 1.5. We are also in the process of building a house. I don't like watching the world burn, and I like to take action as soon as possible to address any difficulties. So I started a talk with my wife to figure out what transpired. I asked her, why did you stop speaking to me, hugging me, and kissing me? Why did you get concerned about the contact of my hand on your body? Why did you stop having any type of closeness with me? She was initially reluctant to speak. There was a difficult cover to breach, but she eventually opened up. What I discovered is that I'm not enough for her. She's doing everything alone. Can't rely on me, and feels like she's wearing the pants around the house. She told me she makes all of the decisions and handles the kids on her own. She even stated, you would be better alone. She mentioned that I'm an introvert, but not a diehard one, among other things. It was upsetting to hear, but I accepted her words. I assured her I understood her suffering and promised to improve my behavior so she wouldn't have to worry about it. I love her so much that I'd rather agree than start a fight. However, I have my own thoughts, which occasionally prevent me from sleeping. A major red flag led me to this group. Her accusations are false, in my opinion, yet I honestly believe I meet the standards of a good husband. I work from home for about 8 to 9 hours per day, but then I care for my boys. I play with them, feed them, take the older one swimming, put them to bed and so on. I can also get up in the middle of the night if necessary. Aside from caring for the children, I help with housework. I do the dishes, grocery shopping, and some cleaning, but she likes to clean because I am not as efficient. I handle the car and other aspects of our new home. I do a lot to make her life simpler, and I know it's difficult with 2 little sons. The truth is, I'm not someone who is constantly proactive. Some folks can't sit on the couch for more than 5 minutes without thinking about what to do next, what to mend, what business to start, or what duties to complete. Her father is like this, but I am not. Once the kids are asleep, the work is completed, and the house is cleaned, I prefer to relax by watching a movie or playing video games. I am also not the sort to start my own business. I am skilled in my profession and prefer to be instructed what to do in order to do my tasks successfully. There are plenty of people like that, and I'm not ashamed of it. I don't pursue a glamorous career. I don't imagine having millions in my bank account. I'm simply a regular guy, a good-looking one, who wants to have a healthy, happy family while earning a reasonable living. I knew she was having problems with that, despite having been happily married for 4 years and together for 5 years prior. The conversation happened in December. After that, I began to work against my personality, which resulted in some proactive effort, such as additional groceries and house repairs. Basically, not sitting on my butt in the evenings. There's no rest. She liked it, but it didn't improve her attitude toward me, so I had to initiate a second conversation. Given how she treated me, I questioned her from the outset. Do you want to save the marriage? She said, I don't know. It was difficult to swallow, but in order to proceed, I asked her, do you want to go to marriage counseling? She said, I don't know. I continued. It's not a moment to not know if our kids may have parents living separately soon. After hearing that, she agreed, and I needed to get a therapist. She showed no interest in that. During our conversation, she revealed to me several sad truths such as, I married you simply to impress my parents and married sisters so that we might have a large happy family with beautiful children. I married you because I was fascinated rather than in love. I also learned that she had a meeting with her colleague clergyman to discuss our marriage. Anyway, I found a fantastic therapist, and we're approaching our 3rd session. We discovered that we have distinct love languages. I require touch. She needs work done. However, she hasn't touched me since we started counseling. No hugging. After the 2 sessions, I asked her whether she liked it and how she felt, and all she said was that she's uncomfortable sharing our personal information with an unknown stranger. When the therapist discovered we hadn't slept in the same room in 6 months, she was taken aback. My wife said that it is because she is sleeping with the children in the bed, and there is no room for me. The therapist responded that not allowing a husband in the bedroom sets a negative example for the children and that if there isn't enough room on the bed, go to IKEA and buy a single bed and install it next to the larger one. I did exactly that. I bought it, put it together, and am currently sleeping there. Funny thing is, I still feel like I'm sleeping alone. She's far to the left, the boys are in the center, and I'm far to the right. My wife's testimony has altered slightly since the beginning of the issue. She began to express her depression as a result of spending so much time at home with her children. She informed me she said all of those things because she was overly emotional, etc. I would never say anything like that to her under any circumstances, but I guess I had to trust her. She recently returned to work, and we hired a nanny. The only change in her conduct is that we began to communicate, but I am more than just her friend. I am also her spouse, and there is no intimacy. There are no signs that things will improve. She doesn't care about the next marriage counseling appointments, so I have to keep arranging them. She informed me she doesn't need sex and had only done it when I wanted it. I felt like an abuser. She was never into lovemaking. We had it once a week, which was okay with me. It could have happened more frequently, but it was fine. We've had sex twice this year, both out of pity. One was in early January to celebrate my birthday. Now it appears that I need to have a birthday to be laid. The other time was following a counseling session. She just lay there, covering her chest and waiting for me to finish, which made me want it less. That is not what this is meant to be about. When I bring it up, she simply replies, "That's who I am. If you don't like it, simply leave me." I do not know what to do. Please advise. Update 1. There was one instance where my wife attempted to phone her ex-boyfriend 4 times in a row at 10 p.m. She didn't talk to him, but she attempted to contact him. I know this because we used to have an app that saved our two phone numbers and allowed me to see incoming and outgoing calls for both. After that, I went crazy. Why does my wife contact her ex 4 times at 10 p.m.? I chose to check her texts on her laptop. I felt bad, but it was justified. We were married, had children, and she was acting strangely. After phoning him 4 times, she texted him, "I'm going to keep calling until you pick up and talk to me like a normal human being." When I asked her about it, she lied and said she wouldn't call him. So I showed her the app and her outgoing calls. She had nothing else to do except admit that she attempted to contact him. I inquired why, and she said that she was phoning back, knowing that she had also written to him after the call. I asked if she wrote to him after the call, and she responded no. Then I showed her the message she sent to him. She said that he had gotten drunk and called her, saying some nonsense. When she heard it, she ordered him to fuck off and hung up. Then she felt bad about it and tried calling him 4 times because he didn't answer. Finally, she wrote what she did and he did not respond. I'm not sure what to think about it. It happened about the time she stopped being intimate with me. Her perspective on the scenario is that it is neither strange nor awful, and that hiding it from me was not crucial to her. The point is, any communication with an ex is a terrible sign, and it is unacceptable to me. Is she cheating? We hadn't had any intimacy in 6 months and then the calls came. Update 2. Thanks to everybody for your insights. At first, I couldn't believe how many of you said she was cheating on me. It reminded me of science fiction, something I'd only see in movies. Maybe I thought my wife would never do something like this, but today everything changed. It became a fact. I feel stupid for being just another person in this circumstance, but I guess that's how life works. Now I know I promised to call her ex and speak with her family, but I decided to take a step back and keep it cool. Could you believe how simple that was? All I did was install a voice-activated recorder in our car, not a GPS. It was only there for 3 days. She took the car for work, then went to a workout, and then called him. Or perhaps he called her. I'm not sure who called who, but I heard everything. It was a video conversation on the phone. I learned everything I needed to know about sex and our respective lifestyles. They talked as my wife and I did when we first met 9 years ago. The same attraction, jokes, and so on. I haven't had this with her in a long time. They even discussed vacation plans. She wants to visit him in July. Wow, she offered him 2 years to move back to our country. I can't believe this. Now, after listening to an hour-long recording of this nonsense, I have some things to process. I need to meet with an attorney next week. All I wanted to say was thank you. You opened my eyes. If it hadn't been for you, I would never have purchased the blasted voice recorder. And to think, I felt horrible putting it in the car. My God. I will keep you updated, but for now, I need to relax and think about my children and what she has done. They started this in September of last year and it took me 2 months to detect changes in her behavior. I will be caring for my elderly father in another city for the next week, therefore she will be unable to work for that time. Instead, she'll use my home office. This also indicates she'll most likely be speaking with him in the office. Should I store the recorder in the office for the next week, or do I have enough? Update 3. It began in September of last year and I've been out of the picture for quite some time. Right now, she doesn't want to spend any time with me in the apartment we rent. She always has an excuse, something to do, visiting her parents, going to see her friends, etc. She even falls asleep or simply lies in bed after we put our children to bed, 1 and 3 years old. The recording says it all. She expresses her love for him, her desire to visit him, and to have sex with him. They talk extensively about his personal life. She told him she wanted to go on a trip with him and that she would marry him shortly. She even said she was leaving me. They talked about his preferred love-making position, so sure, they had sex. It is all there. The thing is, she has no idea that I know. Her entire family and circle of friends have no idea. They simply believe we are going through a brief crisis. She is one of 3 Catholic sisters and attends church every Sunday. We live in a tiny town with 20,000 inhabitants. We recently built a house, but it is not finished. I believe she will petition for divorce very soon. I can tell she is suffering with me in the apartment, and she can't take it longer. Her body language and absolute absence of discussion demonstrate this. She wants me to leave soon so that I can be gone for a while, and then, within 2 years, the AP, affair partner, will relocate to the tiny town to live with her and my 2 young sons in our home. In the recording, she says she gives him 2 years to return to our country. People will understand that she needs a father for her children and will not object. The AP is her first boyfriend. and they dated for 7 years before she married me. We have been together for 9 years. The AP lives abroad but makes frequent visits to our country. I refuse to be played that way. I now have an attorney, and we will meet with him soon to discuss this. I can basically ruin her reputation by giving people clips from the recording. Please provide me with any suggestions. What should I do if she served me papers? According to my attorney, my documents will require a month of preparation. I never imagined I would be dealing with a monster like this. Update 4. I visited with the attorney and got some important information. It turns out that destroying her universe would not be a wise decision. We have children, and I'll be co-parenting with her for the next 15 to 16 years. Another reason is that I respect her family and do not want them to serve as witnesses in the divorce. Also, I would not gain custody of the children because they are young and need to remain with their mother in the tiny town, which is an hour away from me in the capital city. I'd be an every other weekend father anyway. Finally, I would not be able to sell our house because the children require adequate living conditions and will not be able to find alternative housing. They are currently living on her father's farm, which is only temporary. As bad as it seems, this is the truth in Poland, Europe. Following our conversation, the attorney sent her the documents. They were scheduled to be delivered shortly after Easter. Easter is celebrated in Poland over 2 days, on Sunday and Monday. I faked it all at the table, and drinking helped a lot. Yesterday, Tuesday, I had a day off from work and was caring for my 1-year-old son. She went to work in the capital city, which is an hour away. In the interim, my brother assisted me in moving all of my belongings from the flat to his car. The postman delivered the divorce papers, which were actually an invitation to mediation, so that we could divide things civilly and divorce amicably. According to the article, she is in a relationship with this guy, which is why she is getting divorced. The evidence I have will be used as leverage when establishing child support, etc. When she entered the house, I informed her that I knew everything. I have incontrovertible documentation. I am profoundly hurt by it, and she should call my lawyer. Then I handed her the divorce papers and left to visit her folks. Of course, she began to question what and how I knew, and she denied everything. Her parents were shocked, but they believed me. I documented everything, as instructed by my counsel. It began with me asking if they thought I was a nice, caring husband and father. They agreed, and now she can't use them as witnesses against me in court. As I previously stated, they believed me and recognized that what she had done was horrific. She had devastated our lives as well as the lives of our children. I thanked them for their understanding and headed to the capital. Meanwhile, I called a buddy, who took care of delivering the news to her friends. 2 hours later, my brother-in-law called to tell me that she admitted to cheating on me with the AP, affair partner, but she did not admit to having sex with him. He told me that everyone was on my side, and she had destroyed our family. He also informed me that her sister had visited my soon-to-be ex-wife and told her how nasty she is. But in the end, he claimed that all could be saved. He had cheated on his wife, she had forgiven him, and they were now happy. Then her father called and said that it was entirely her responsibility and that she had no idea what she had done. He informed me that the AP would never enter his home and that he would stop financially supporting my soon-to-be ex-wife. He even contacted the AP, but the individual did not answer. In the end, he expressed his belief that it could be salvaged. Finally, her other sister texted me, saying she fully supports me but feels it can be saved. I dislike that because I am certain it cannot be rescued. I'm concerned they'll cling to the fact that I don't have a love-making tape of them, and my reasoning will be insufficient to convince her to go. I have audio recordings of mom saying stuff like, "Make sure you'll last more than 3 seconds when I see you in Holland," and, "I wonder whether your dad's junk is the same as yours." You know what? I'll approach that woman and ask her how long your brother's crap is, then tell her how long yours is. She also used phrases like, "I love you. I am planning to leave my hubby. Please record yourself and give me the video. Your favorite position is crappy style with a straight back, and I'm showing you what your life with me will be like. I'm giving you 2 years to relocate back here." All of this, combined with her lack of emotion toward me during the last 7 months, is proof enough for me. Furthermore, soon after the incident, she informed me that she would never stop loving him. This is more than adequate proof for me. What are your thoughts? Anyway, as many of you have previously indicated, she is currently crawling back after her family confronted her with everything. She's sending me texts like, "I had no idea what I was doing. I can't picture life without you. I am deeply sorry for anything I have done. I'm waiting with the kids for your return." She also stated that she did not mean to inform me that she has always loved him. I'm not sure, they're making me feel like I rushed into the divorce since I don't have a real love-making tape. They do not know everything. All they know is that I have proof, but she won't acknowledge having sex with him. It's plausible because he's in Holland, but he may have seen her here. Update 5. Many of you informed me that now that the papers had been served, she would begin crawling back to save her face in front of the family and to get me back because she requires a lot of assistance with our 2 young boys. It happened, she began writing to me on Messenger, although not very frequently. All of the messages read the same. I can't imagine my life without you. I love only you. She also sent images of our children and words stating, "We're waiting for you and love you very, very much." That is it. It has been 5 weeks and she hasn't contacted or visited me. She had numerous possibilities, including driving past my parents' house, where I currently live. Only messenger texts appear infrequently. We also saw each other a few times while switching children, and she never tried to apologize or say anything, just a brief hi and bye. Her family began communicating with me much more regularly. Her father contacted me twice, her mother emailed me a dozen links to Christian pages about forgiveness, and one of her sisters texted me, apologizing and believing my wife has been possessed by an evil spirit. Her other sister explained how my wife had damaged our family and that she did not expect me to return to her. My brother-in-law even stopped over and took me out for a beer. He wasn't attempting to be persuasive, he was simply discussing what had happened and what might happen in the future if I didn't return. Sure, he wanted me to come back, but he wasn't forcing me. Essentially, all of these conversations were the same. We can't believe she did what she did. We would like you to return to her, but we understand if you do not. However, the day came when I had made up my mind. My lawyer informed her lawyer that I had decided that I would not be able to forgive her in time and requested a divorce. My lawyer provided my terms, and we're currently waiting for her counsel to respond. While I waited for their response, her sister began criticizing me and telling me that I was going to wreck the marriage. She claimed unequivocally that it was my wife who started all of this by being selfish, but she is now very regretful, crying, and wishing she could turn back time. Now it is my turn to be selfish, and I intend to end the marriage by divorcing her. According to her, it's all on me now because I can rescind the divorce and return it for the children. She suggested I didn't even need to return to my wife, just raise my 2 sons. She told me how angry I am and how it will only become worse with time. She told me to just suck it up and keep living with my wife, framing this divorce as my revenge on her but stressing that it is also retribution on our children. I can't understand it. Others had warned me that this would happen, that the circumstances would shift and her family would turn against me, but it still shocked me. For a moment today I felt horrible, as if it was all my fault, that my wife treated me like garbage for more than half a year, that she chose to abandon me physically and emotionally, and that she wanted to leave. So yes, they had a strong influence on me. It's incredibly difficult, but I won't change my mind. The divorce will occur. It appears that they now have a narrative in which I am the guy who abandons the kids. I've been thinking about how to end this dispute by giving my terms for reconciliation, terms she's unlikely to accept. I don't love her, but I do it for the kids, whom I adore dearly. No marriage, only a relationship. Separate your finances. She leaves her hometown and moves with her children to the capital city where I live, GPS in the car till she stops driving in her old age, daily phone checks, all after I finish my 7 months of dates with random girls. I would also not be afraid to cheat during the relationship and never tell her. If she finds out, it makes no difference because there is no marriage. I do not care. What are your thoughts? It's only a notion. Nothing serious. I probably won't do it anyhow, but I don't know what else to do to keep the family from accusing me of abandoning the children. In Poland, Europe, tiny children like ours must be near their mother in the event of a divorce. I can't have them since she lives in a tiny town an hour distant from me, and the kids attend kindergarten and nursery there. We cannot divide custody 50-50ths. I'll be the every other weekend dad, with full access anytime I choose. It's sad and unpleasant, but that's how it is. Update 6. It's been 2 months since I confronted her, gave her divorce papers, and relocated to the capital city, an hour away from the little hamlet where we used to live together. I currently live with my parents and sleep on the couch in their living room. The dining table has been converted into a workspace/entertainment area, and my clothes are hung on every chair around. I work from home for 8 hours and then normally help my elderly parents, who are 88 and 71 years old, with household duties. I do their grocery and drive them to doctor's appointments. Apart from that, I go to the gym or the movies to get away from bad thoughts about what happened. I visit my children every weekend. She drops them off, and I take them back. The weekends are fantastic, and I find myself actually happy when I'm with them. I took a paternity test, and the boys are mine, so there is no confusion there. The situation with the divorce terms is currently unknown. It's difficult to predict what will happen because I live with my parents, and as a father of two and a mature man, I don't have anywhere else to live. I want a large sum of money from my wife and she is taking over the mortgage for the house. She consented to the mortgage takeover but only offered 1/3 of the amount I requested, citing her contribution to the house's construction. The thing is, I did not cause this circumstance. I'm not guilty, and I need a place to live. 1/3 of the sum I want will not help me buy a flat, so the discussion between our attorneys continues. She's offering me such a low price because she wants to keep the house. However, the last time we spoke, I learned that she may be forced to sell it. This is what she should have done since the beginning. She'll be unable to pay both the mortgage and me. We'll see how it goes. Other financial issues, such as child support, are also up for debate. She wants too much, and it must be agreed upon. She also argues that I should be the one to pick up the children from the little town and drive them home. By the end of the weekend, there will have been a lot of fuel and time spent. It should be her dropping them off and me driving them home. As you can see, she is responsible for everything, but she is also willing to argue about the conditions of the divorce. Her sister invited me to attend her daughter's communion last Sunday. I went to spend more time with my boys. Every family member is aware that my decision is definite, therefore they did not even attempt to talk to me about it. I basically took care of my boys while everyone else drank and ate at the table following the ceremony. However, at one point my wife questioned whether my decision was completely final. I glanced at her and said as gently as I could, "Yes, it is final, and nothing will change it. I'm here now for my guys, to spend as much time with them as possible." However, she went on to express her genuine shame and regret for what she had done. She informed me she stopped her relationship with the AP by going to an exorcist, telling him everything about the affair, and then leaving it in God's hands. To that, I said that I don't care about her priest, and if there's anyone she should be telling everything to, it's me. At that point, it was just ludicrous, but I said, "Okay, if you're truly sorry, I'm here to give you one last chance to tell me the whole truth. Tell me how often you had sex with him." She said that she didn't. Then I asked her, "Do you remember that party you held with your work pals in November? Why did you rent a flat for the night, Airbnb, instead of staying at one of your friends' apartments?" After hearing it, she went paralyzed and couldn't say anything except, "Why do you need to keep torturing yourself with it?" I stated that if she was truly sorry, she would stop lying 2 months after I left her. This was just one example. I told her having sex over video chat is the same, and I knew she did it with him. She could not remember how many times she had done it with the AP. After that, I asked her, "How do you picture getting back together? You start a conversation with me, then lie the next second. Do you realize I'll be checking your phone every day? What are your thoughts about that?" She responded, "That would not be trust. It would simply be treating me as rubbish." Then our son intervened, and the conversation was nearing its end. I ended with, "Remember, you didn't just cheat on me. You also cheated on our 2 adorable, wonderful boys." It ruined her. She began shrieking that this was the last time I told her something like that in front of our children. It's interesting because her sister has told me that my wife is hurting and crying every day as a result of all of this. It's a true two-faced woman, sobbing in front of her family while lying to me. She even stated that if she wished, she would join the AP and her family. I couldn't do anything about it, as if I should be grateful that she broke up with him and is now in control of not being with him. So come on. I think I'm simply venting at this point and keeping you updated. Thank you all for your support. I'll be strong and end this mess one day. I believe my boys will want psychological assistance if things do not turn out nicely. The older one has been scared lately, but I will always be there for them. Update 7. Our attorneys finally reached a deal, and the divorce will take place shortly. She has taken over the unfinished house and is now solely responsible for the mortgage. The house is for the kids, and I don't want anyone to tell me later that I sold it as part of my revenge on her. Furthermore, I don't want to live in her small hamlet, which is an hour away from the capital city where I am currently. However, I am receiving what I put into it, and that amount is not awful at all. The child support amount is reasonable, and we agreed that she will drop the kids off to my residence in the capital city every other weekend. I'll just need to drive them back. Now, I see my children virtually every weekend, but it's not enough for me. It causes me so much anguish that I can't take it sometimes. I simply cannot allow 1- and 3-year-old boys to grow up without a father because of an unruly mother. I only wish I could have them, but it's not feasible due to Polish laws. I'll have to start driving there in the middle of the week or something to get by. As for her, She keeps texting me that she loves me, wishes she could go back in time, and is suffering as a result of her actions each day. She softened to the point that she told me that she no longer considers checking her phone to be treating her as garbage. She agreed and said I could do it all the time. She also said we may transfer from the tiny village to the main metropolis. She pledged to tell me everything about the affair, every detail, if I would accept her back. She came to see my parents and apologized. Something must have changed, or someone must have informed her of something. She's now eager to do anything and even displaying some guilt. The last time she messaged me, she said, "Thank you for not selling the house and ending the relationship amicably. Accepting the divorce is synonymous with agreeing to your terms. I'll have to agree in court, but let me assure you that it won't be true. I do not want this divorce, and I adore you. I know you don't believe it and I understand, but I want you to know that I hope to have the opportunity to prove my love to you someday. I adore you and am sorry for everything. There are no words to explain how much I regret everything. Things like those sway me and hinder the healing process. I'd be lying if I said her remarks didn't affect me. The idea of my boys growing up in the capital city rather than the tiny town is appealing. I know she struggles with being alone with two tiny boys, but she cheated and wrecked everything. I expected it to grow better with time, but the wound healed quite slowly. I shall remain the course. I'll end this. I'll update one day, maybe when I'm finally happy. What are your thoughts? Do you believe my wife is sincerely sorry? She only agreed to tell me about her infidelity after I stated I might come back, not right away. She didn't offer to let me check her phone immediately. She did not immediately volunteer to go to the metropolis from the tiny village. It took 3 months for her to demonstrate contrition. When she apologizes, she doesn't even contact or visit me. She does it over Messenger. Her entire family has now sided with her. Her mother calls me a narcissist, and her sister claims that I only want to profit from the divorce and leave a lady with 2 young sons. I paid a brief visit to my children yesterday, and she invited me to spend the night. Naturally, I left. I'd appreciate any insight. Update 8. D-Day was April 7th, and here's how I feel after nearly half a year. In such complex scenarios, the same questions must be answered on a daily basis. In my case, the question is if I still love her. Could I go back to her solely for the children? Do I want to return to her little village to complete building the house? Would I be okay with myself in 5 to 10 years knowing what she had done? The answer to all of the inquiries is a resounding negative at this point. That is it. Yes, I adore my children and wish I could spend every day with them, but I cannot. I want to love her, but I can't. Even though she wants me back. I wish I could have that family back, but I cannot. I want to forget everything, but I can't. I even gave her a second chance, which included moving to my city with the kids to begin a new life. She didn't even agree, telling me that she has her family's assistance in the little town and will not sell the house since she wants our children to have something in the future. When I informed her that family isn't the silly building, but a mother, father, and children, she just shut up. This is when I realized there is no longer a us. There is no mutual agreement or middle ground in this. I mentioned that I would not continue living in the tiny town because that is where the affair began. He observed her driving down the street and phoned her. I went on to say that I will not finish building a house 1 mile away from her AP's family home, and that I will not spend another day of my life worrying about meeting him someday. He lives abroad but pays 2 to 3 visits to his family each year. The conversation then ended. I despise the little town. She does not wish to live in the capital, that is it. Here's an example of how she approaches things. We agreed that I would take the money I put into the house and she would keep the building for the children. She now has an issue with this because there is a clause in the agreement that specifies she cannot sell the house until the children reach 18, adults in Poland. Otherwise, she will have to divide the money she would receive from selling the house evenly between herself and me. She believes this is unjust because she intends to build the house with her own money, and if it is sold, I would receive half of the proceeds from a far more expensive finished house. When I asked her why she would consider selling it, she explained that she cannot anticipate what her life will be like. I can't trust her at this point, so I'm considering just selling the building. I can't bear the thought of selling the house I bought for my children. Update 9. She sent me a message today asking for a response to her question. I'm asking you online because if I were to do it in person, we'd just shout at each other. You've told me who I am and what I've done, and you don't want to talk about it anymore. After all of this, do you want to forgive me, put the past behind you and start over with your family, or do you already know you don't and will never be able to forgive me, and you'll never return to us? Please think about it and let me know if you want our marriage back. What does this mean? I don't think she's in a position to demand that I be so detailed right now. I believe there is another person involved, and she wants to discuss the problem with me. I replied, I'm worth more than a messenger conversation, and we'll talk soon. I chatted to her. I laid forth my only two conditions for this marriage to last. Move to the capital city and cut all links with the AP and his family. The second is obvious to her, but the first is an insurmountable impediment. She apologizes for her actions, but she refuses to relocate to Warsaw because we will never be able to afford a magnificent large house there, and even tiny apartments are prohibitively expensive to rent. She claims that our children have it easy in the tiny town. She just pays the bills for the flat she presently resides in because it is her father's property. In Warsaw, she would have to spend 4 to 5 times more for a smaller flat, bills and rent. She also has enough friends and family to visit with the kids after work. That is all true. I see the children are pleased, and it is handy for her. She claimed if we moved, only I would be thrilled about it. It would boost my ego. It's just a bad scenario since she's right. Her sister owns the small town's kindergarten, which we pay nearly nothing for. She simply put me in an impossible scenario to solve. Situation: I hold my ground. I will not live in the little town, but it does not make sense for them to relocate. In this scenario, we agreed that I would simply continue to visit and spend as much time as possible with the children. I will continue to take them to Warsaw every other weekend. She informed me she will not date anyone else and will only wait for me, and that I will see for myself in the future, that she will remain single. I find it difficult to believe, but I don't really care. Maybe it's good since the kids will just have me as a father figure, rather than some random guy. During our chat, she said several things that demonstrated that she is not a remorseful person. When I asked why she hadn't phoned me once during our separation and had just texted me, she stated she didn't have time with 2 kids running around the house. She stated that she will never discuss the affair again and will not provide me with any other information if I inquire. She is done with it and will not discuss anything else with me because I informed her family some information she did not want me to share with them. She informed me that the AP had been writing to her for many years and that she had always rejected him, but when he wrote last year, she chose to start an affair with him due to my passive approach. I immediately told her what she said was very horrible, and she rolled her eyes and said, "You're only thinking about yourself. You are the only poor guy in this." Update 10. I've learned to live alone with little time with my children, and now I want to date again. Actually, I began using dating apps some time ago. I get a good number of matches, and arranging up a date with a nice woman is no problem. In general, I had 2 to 3 short-term relationships that had to terminate since I was always busy with the kids when they wanted to meet. Every other weekend is completely off, although I wish they were longer. I always lied about having a meeting or whatever, and they saw it as a lack of interest on my part. The trouble is, how can I navigate this? For the time being, I don't tell new girls that I'm almost divorced with 2 children. I discovered that the only way for the second or third date to occur is to avoid exposing this too soon. Is there a solution to this? Is there any chance a girl would stick with me if I gave her the truth from the start? Has anyone experienced a similar situation? I don't necessarily want to be in a serious relationship right now, but I hope to be in one in the future. Am I the A for abandoning my boyfriend after he went through a severe health crisis and his child was diagnosed with HIV? I am Ellen, a 53-year-old woman who has seen a fair share of life's ups and downs. My story intertwines with Richard's, a 62-year-old man whose presence in my life brought both joy and complexity. Our paths crossed in the spring of 2005, at a charity event that neither of us had any real interest in attending but did so out of a sense of duty. It was one of those evenings filled with polite conversations and superficial exchanges, the kind that leaves one wondering why they bothered to attend. Amidst the mundane chatter and clinking of wine glasses, Richard and I found ourselves repeatedly reaching for the same appetizers at the buffet table. What started as light-hearted banter over the shrimp cocktail turned into a deeper conversation. Richard's laugh was hearty and infectious, and it drew me in. His hair, a mix of black and gray, framed a face that seemed to carry both wisdom and weariness. There was something comforting about his presence, something genuine in a room full of pretense. Our initial connection was rooted in shared interests. We both had a deep appreciation for jazz and a love for classic films. Our dates often involved long walks through the park, where we'd talk about everything from the nuances of a Miles Davis track to the intricate storytelling in Fellini's films. Richard was a widower who spoke of his late wife with a tenderness that resonated with me. It was clear that he had loved deeply and lost profoundly, a fact that made him all the more endearing to me. I had been divorced for over a decade by then, and while the scars from that relationship had mostly healed, they left behind a cautious heart. My marriage had ended in a painful and drawn-out process, filled with emotional upheavals and legal battles that took their toll on me. The experience had made me wary of opening up to anyone again. I had built walls around my heart, convinced that vulnerability would only lead to more pain. Trusting someone else seemed like an insurmountable risk, and I had resigned myself to a life of solitude, finding solace in my independence and self-reliance. When I met Richard, I was not looking for love. In fact, I was content with my single life, focusing on my career, my hobbies, and my close-knit group of friends. Richard, however, had a way of gently easing into my life, his presence unassuming yet steadily becoming a fixture. He understood loss in a way that resonated with me deeply. As a widower, he had faced his own profound grief and loneliness, and this shared understanding of loss became a foundation for our connection. Richard's approach to our budding relationship was marked by patience and kindness. He never rushed me or pushed for more than I was ready to give. Instead, he offered a steady, reassuring presence that slowly chipped away at my reservations. His gentle demeanor and the genuine warmth he showed me began to erode the walls I had built around my heart. Our early days together were filled with simple, quiet moments that brought us closer. We spent long afternoons walking in the park, sharing stories about our pasts, our hopes, and our fears. Richard had a knack for making me laugh, his sense of humor lightening the heaviness that sometimes weighed on my spirit. We discovered a shared love for jazz and classic films, spending evenings listening to records or watching old movies. These shared interests created a sense of companionship that felt both comforting and natural. Richard's empathy and understanding played a crucial role in building my trust. He never dismissed my past or the pain I had endured. Instead, he listened, offering support without judgment. When I spoke about my divorce, the betrayal, and the heartache, he would hold my hand, his presence a silent assurance that he was there for me. This empathy made it easier for me to open up, to let go of some of the fears that had held me back. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, our relationship grew stronger. We found comfort in each other's company, creating a rhythm that felt right. Richard's understanding of my need for space and his respect for my boundaries made all the difference. He knew when to give me room and when to offer a comforting embrace. This balance allowed our bond to deepen in a way that felt safe and secure. Our companionship became a source of strength for both of us. For Richard, I provided a new chapter of connection and care after the loss of his wife. For me, Richard became a partner who understood my cautious heart and honored it. Together, we navigated the complexities of our pasts, finding joy in the present and hope for the future. Richard's consistent kindness and our shared moments of joy slowly healed the lingering wounds from my previous relationship. I found myself looking forward to our time together, feeling a sense of peace and happiness that I hadn't felt in years. The cautious heart that once dominated my emotions began to soften, replaced by a growing love and trust for Richard. However, Richard's health was always a looming concern. He had chronic health issues, including hypertension and diabetes, which required careful management. Despite this, I was ready to stand by him, prepared to face whatever challenges came our way. My love for him was deep and unwavering, and I envisioned a future where we could navigate his health concerns together, offering each other support and companionship. In the early years of my relationship with Richard, our bond grew strong, nourished by shared interests and mutual understanding. Richard, at 62, had already faced significant health challenges, including hypertension and diabetes. Despite these issues, his zest for life was infectious, and it was this enthusiasm that drew me to him. At 53, I was acutely aware of the potential difficulties that lay ahead, but my commitment to Richard was unwavering. As time went on, the topic of marriage naturally arose. For me, marriage symbolized a formal commitment, a way to legally and publicly affirm the bond we shared. I imagined a future where we would navigate life's challenges together, with the security that marriage provides. Richard, however, had a different perspective. Having been through a bitter divorce, he was hesitant to remarry. His primary concern was to ensure that his estate would go to his children without any complications. He believed that our love did not need a legal stamp to validate it. I understood Richard's concerns and respected his desire to prioritize his children's inheritance. However, I also needed to protect my own interests. I made it clear that while I was willing to support him and stand by his side, I would not make the same sacrifices a wife might without the legal acknowledgement of marriage. This was not about mistrust but about ensuring that my contributions and sacrifices were recognized and valued. During one of our more serious conversations about the future, I proposed a compromise. I suggested that he make me his medical power of attorney, which would allow me to make decisions on his behalf in case of a medical emergency. Additionally, I requested the right to continue living in his house if I outlived him. These requests were reasonable, considering the level of care and support I was providing. However, Richard declined, not wanting to complicate matters for his children. Despite these unresolved issues, our relationship continued to thrive. I took pride in maintaining my financial independence. I purchased a condo and rented it out, ensuring I had a steady income stream. This decision was a practical one, allowing me to support Richard without compromising my own financial stability. It was important to me that I remained self-sufficient, even as I devoted much of my time and energy to our relationship. The more we talked about our future, the more I realized the complexities of balancing love with practical considerations. I had always believed in the importance of mutual respect and support in a relationship. Richard's reluctance to marry, and his refusal to grant me any formal recognition made me question the depth of his commitment. While I understood his reasons, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment. I wanted to believe that our love was strong enough to overcome these obstacles, but the reality was more complicated. Over time, I learned to accept the limitations of our relationship. I focused on the positive aspects, our shared interests, our deep conversations, and the companionship we provided each other. I found solace in the fact that, despite our differences, we had built a meaningful connection. However, the underlying tension about our future and the unresolved issues regarding our commitment always lingered in the background. It happened about 6 months ago. Richard, my boyfriend of 15 years, suffered a transient ischemic attack, TIA, often referred to as a mini-stroke. The event was sudden and terrifying, sending a shockwave through the comfortable routine we had established over the years. It was a typical evening. Richard and I were enjoying a quiet night at home. We had just finished dinner and were sitting in the living room, him reading the newspaper and me with a book. Suddenly, Richard slumped in his chair, his face contorted with pain. His speech became slurred, and his right arm went limp. Panic gripped me as I realized something was terribly wrong. My immediate fear was that he was having a full-blown stroke. I acted quickly, dialing 911 with trembling hands. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way, but those minutes felt like an eternity. I held Richard's hand, trying to comfort him while silently praying for the ambulance to arrive. When the paramedics finally came, they moved with practiced efficiency, loading Richard onto a stretcher and into the ambulance. I followed them to the hospital, my heart racing with fear and worry. At the hospital, Richard was taken into the emergency room for immediate evaluation. I was left in the waiting area, filled with anxiety and uncertainty. The sterile environment, with its harsh fluorescent lights and the incessant beeping of medical equipment, only heightened my distress. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I waited for any news about Richard's condition. Then, his daughter and ex-wife arrived. His daughter, whom I had always found somewhat distant, immediately took charge. She approached the nurses, demanding updates on her father's condition. Her mother, Richard's ex-wife, followed closely behind. Their presence added an unexpected layer of tension to an already fraught situation. They barely acknowledged me as they marched straight into the emergency room. A nurse soon approached me, conveying a message from Richard's daughter. They wanted to be alone with him. They insisted on being together as a family during this critical time, effectively pushing me aside. Despite my protests, I was asked to leave the room. The nurse, although sympathetic, explained that it was best to respect their wishes. Standing in the hallway, I felt a mix of anger, frustration, and profound sadness. I had been the one to call the ambulance, the one who had rushed him to the hospital, yet here I was, excluded from the room, cast aside by the very people who had not been there when it mattered. It was a stark reminder of my unofficial status in Richard's life, despite our deep connection and years of shared experiences. I paced the hallway, trying to process my emotions. The exclusion stung deeply, highlighting the fragile and uncertain nature of my role in Richard's life. I had been his partner for 15 years, but in this critical moment, I was treated as an outsider. The emotional impact of being marginalized by his family was significant. I felt like I was invisible, my contributions and care disregarded. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor finally emerged with an update. Richard's condition had stabilized. The TIA had been a temporary blockage of blood flow to the brain, a warning sign of potential more severe issues in the future. He would need to stay in the hospital for further observation and treatment. Relief washed over me, tempered by the exhaustion and emotional strain of the day's events. As Richard's daughter and ex-wife continued their vigil inside the room, I remained outside, grappling with my feelings. The hospital staff, seeing my distress, offered kind words and gestures, but it did little to alleviate the sense of alienation I felt. I spent the night in the waiting area, refusing to leave until I could see Richard myself. The following morning, Richard's daughter stepped out to get coffee. Seizing the moment, I quietly entered Richard's room. He was lying in bed, looking frail but conscious. When he saw me, his eyes softened with relief. I sat beside him, holding his hand, and we talked in hushed tones. He apologized for his daughter's behavior, but the damage was already done. The sense of exclusion and marginalization I had experienced could not be easily undone. After a brief visit, I was asked to leave again as his daughter returned. The emotional turmoil of the previous night replayed in my mind as I drove home. I felt a profound sense of betrayal and disillusionment. Despite my dedication and care, I had been treated as though I didn't belong. The drive home was long and silent, each mile filled with heavy thoughts. Once home, the familiar surroundings felt strangely alien. The events at the hospital had created a rift, making our shared space feel less like a haven, and more like a reminder of my uncertain place in Richard's life. I spent the day reflecting on our relationship, questioning my future with him. The following days were filled with routine hospital visits. I continued to bring Richard his favorite books and snacks, trying to provide comfort and normalcy. Our conversations were strained, overshadowed by the recent events. Richard was visibly troubled by his daughter's actions, but there was little he could do to change the dynamics of his family. One afternoon, during one of my visits, I found myself alone with Richard. We talked about the future, and I reiterated my desire to be included in his medical decisions and living arrangements. Richard, though sympathetic, remained firm in his stance. He did not want to complicate matters for his children. His refusal, though understandable, left me feeling unvalued and unsupported. Richard's condition slowly improved, and he was eventually discharged from the hospital. The drive home was filled with an uncomfortable silence. As we pulled into the driveway, I knew a difficult conversation awaited us. Over a cup of tea in the kitchen, I told Richard about my decision to move out. His reaction was a mix of disbelief and sorrow. He understood my reasons but pleaded with me to reconsider. I explained that while I loved him deeply, the events at the hospital had highlighted the limitations of our relationship. I needed to prioritize my own well-being and security, something I had neglected in my effort to support him. Richard listened, his expression a mix of regret and sadness. He apologized for the actions of his family, but the damage had been done. My mind was made up. Packing my belongings was a painful process. Each item I placed in the box felt like a piece of our shared history, a reminder of the life we had built together. The sense of loss was overwhelming, but I knew that this was the right decision for my own well-being. I moved into my condo, finding solace in the familiar surroundings and the sense of independence it provided. In the months that followed, Richard experienced more TIAs and was eventually unable to work. I struggled with feelings of guilt and sadness, questioning whether I had made the right decision. However, I also felt a sense of relief, knowing that I had reclaimed my autonomy and ensured my own stability. I continued to support Richard from a distance, ensuring that he had the care he needed. However, the dynamics of our relationship had fundamentally changed. However, I was wrong. Richard's daughter, Susan, had always been a complicated figure in our relationship. Though I had never had any major confrontations with her before, I had always sensed a certain animosity from her. She was in her mid-30s, a striking woman with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. Susan had never fully accepted me into her father's life, always keeping me at arm's length, but her actions following Richard's TIA revealed a side of her that I hadn't seen before. A few weeks after I moved out, my phone rang late one evening. It was Susan. I answered, expecting a civil conversation at the very least. Instead, her voice, filled with venom, erupted on the other end of the line. She accused me of abandoning her father in his time of need, calling me selfish and heartless. Her words were a barrage of insults, each one sharper and more hurtful than the last. She claimed I had left because I couldn't handle the responsibility and that I had never truly cared for him. The conversation was short, but the impact was lasting. Her accusations were not just painful. They were deeply unfair. Susan's anger seemed to stem from a belief that I had somehow betrayed her father, but I knew the truth was more complex. When I left, I believed that it might be easier for her to take care of Richard without feeling like she had to compete with me for his attention. I thought she would welcome the opportunity to step up and take on a more significant role in his care. But her reaction suggested otherwise. The conversation left me shaken and doubting my decision, even though I knew deep down that I had made the right choice for myself. Despite the hostility from Susan, I continued to care for Richard from a distance. I called regularly to check on him and coordinated with his caregivers to ensure he had everything he needed. But Susan's words lingered in my mind, casting a shadow over my actions and making me question my motives. One night, about a month after that call, I was on my way to buy groceries. It was late, around 11 p.m., and the streets were quiet. As I walked past a local bar, I noticed someone familiar slipping inside. It was Susan. I was taken aback. Richard's condition required constant attention, and I couldn't help but wonder why she was at a bar instead of at home taking care of him. Curiosity and concern battled within me as I stood there, contemplating what I had just seen. I continued my errands, but the image of Susan entering the bar stayed with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. If Susan was out drinking late at night, who was looking after Richard? This question gnawed at me, and I felt a growing sense of unease. Had I been wrong to trust that she would take care of him in my absence? The thought that Richard might not be receiving the care he needed was troubling. The next day, I decided to call Richard's nurse to get an update on his condition. The nurse assured me that Richard was stable and that he was receiving the necessary care. However, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Susan's late-night outing had planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Was she as committed to her father's well-being as she claimed to be? The incident made me question everything I thought I knew about her. As the weeks went by, I tried to focus on my own life, but the sense of guilt and worry persisted. I continued to check in on Richard, and each time, I made sure to ask about his care and well-being. The responses were always positive, but Susan's behavior continued to trouble me. I began to realize that her anger towards me might not have been just about my leaving. There seemed to be more to her story, and her actions hinted at a deeper complexity. One afternoon, I could no longer contain my growing concern for Richard's well-being. Susan's erratic behavior and frequent absences had become too troubling to ignore. Deciding that a direct confrontation was necessary, I picked up the phone and called her, requesting a meeting. To my surprise, Susan agreed without much resistance, and we arranged to meet at a local cafe the following day. As I walked into the cafe, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Susan was already seated at a small table near the window, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mixture of wariness and irritation. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead, and slid into the chair opposite her. "Thank you for meeting with me, Susan," I began, trying to keep my tone calm and neutral. She nodded curtly, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What do you want, Ellen?" I decided to address the issue head-on. "I saw you at the bar the other night," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm concerned about the times you're away, and how it affects your father's care." Susan's eyes widened in surprise, and then her expression shifted to one of defensiveness. "I'm allowed to have my own life," she snapped. "I need a break from the stress of taking care of my father. You don't understand how hard it is." Her response, while reasonable on the surface, did little to alleviate my concerns. "I understand that everyone needs a break," I replied gently. "But Richard's condition requires consistent care. What arrangements are in place when you're not there?" Susan's agitation grew, and she leaned forward, her eyes flashing with anger. "Are you spying on me now? Trying to undermine everything I do? I'm doing the best I can, and you have no right to question me." I tried to remain calm, even as her accusations stung. "I'm not trying to undermine you, Susan. I just want to make sure Richard is getting the care he needs. I'm worried about him." "You're always worried," she spat, her voice rising. "But you're not here day in and day out dealing with all of this. It's easy for you to sit back and judge." The conversation was rapidly spiraling out of control. I could see that my questions were only fueling her anger, but I couldn't walk away without addressing my concerns. "Susan, please try to understand. This isn't about judging you. It's about ensuring that Richard is safe and well cared for." She glared at me, her face flushed with anger. "You think you know everything, don't you? You think you can just waltz in and fix things? Well, you can't. You don't know what it's like to be in my shoes." Her words cut deep and I felt a surge of frustration. "I'm not trying to take over, Susan. I just want to help. We both care about Richard, and we need to work together." But my words fell on deaf ears. Susan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm done here," she snapped. "Stay out of my way, Ellen. You're not helping anyone." With that, she stormed out of the cafe, leaving me sitting there, stunned and disheartened. The conversation had ended abruptly, with no resolution and more questions than answers. I stared down at the table, feeling a mix of frustration and helplessness. I had hoped that a direct confrontation would clear the air and lead to a constructive solution, but it had only served to deepen the divide between us. As I left the cafe, I couldn't help but replay the conversation in my mind. Susan's defensiveness and anger were understandable to some extent, given the immense pressure she was under. But her refusal to discuss Richard's care arrangements left me deeply concerned. I worried that her stress and frequent absences were putting Richard at risk. In the days that followed, I continued to wrestle with my feelings. I loved Richard deeply, and the thought of him not being properly cared for was unbearable. Yet Susan's reaction made it clear that my involvement was unwelcome. I was caught between my desire to ensure Richard's well-being, and the reality that my presence was creating more conflict. One evening I decided to visit Richard unannounced. I needed to see for myself how he was doing. When I arrived at his house, I was greeted by one of his caregivers, who seemed surprised but not displeased to see me. I found Richard in his room, sitting in his armchair and reading a book. He looked up and smiled when he saw me, his eyes lighting up with a warmth that melted away some of my anxiety. We talked for a while, and I asked him about his care. Richard assured me that he was being well taken care of, but there was a hint of sadness in his voice. He missed our time together, and I could see the strain that Susan's presence was causing him. It became clear that while he appreciated her efforts, the dynamic between them was fraught with tension. As I left that evening, I felt a renewed sense of resolve. I decided to maintain my distance but remain vigilant. I continued to check in regularly with Richard's caregivers and ensured that they had my contact information in case of any emergencies. I also made a point to visit Richard more often, making sure to coordinate with his caregivers so as not to disrupt his routine. The months that followed were challenging. Susan's hostility towards me did not abate, and each interaction with her was strained. However, my visits with Richard brought a measure of peace to both of us. He appreciated my efforts, and I found comfort in knowing that I was still able to contribute to his well-being in some capacity. On one particularly cold afternoon, I decided to visit Richard unannounced. As I approached the house, I heard raised voices coming from inside. It was unmistakably Susan, her tone sharp and accusatory. I paused at the door, hesitant to enter but compelled by concern. I strained to hear the words exchanged but could only make out fragments of the argument. "I'm tired of this." Susan's voice rang out, filled with frustration. "You're not doing your job properly. You're fired." The front door swung open and Richard's caretaker emerged, her face flushed and eyes downcast. She almost collided with me as she hurried out. I reached out to stop her, gently placing a hand on her arm. "What happened? Why are you leaving?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She looked up at me, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. It's nothing. Just a misunderstanding," she muttered, shaking her head sadly before continuing down the walkway, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Susan had fired the caretaker, a woman who had been providing diligent care for Richard. My heart sank. I knew I had to go inside and check on Richard, but I also felt an increasing unease about Susan's actions and their impact on her father's well-being. When I entered the house, Richard was sitting in his usual chair, looking more worn out than usual. He greeted me with a weak smile, but his eyes reflected a deep sadness. "Ellen, it's good to see you," he said, his voice weary. I sat down beside him, taking his hand in mine. "What happened with the caretaker, Richard? Why did Susan fire her?" He sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. "Susan thinks the caretaker isn't doing enough. She's been very stressed lately, taking on more than she can handle. I tried to intervene, but Susan can be quite stubborn." I felt a surge of anger mixed with sadness. Richard needed consistent care, and Susan's behavior was jeopardizing his health. I couldn't understand why she would dismiss someone who had been doing their job well, especially when Richard's condition required professional attention. Over the next few weeks I noticed a decline in Richard's health. Without a dedicated caretaker, the burden fell entirely on Susan, who seemed increasingly overwhelmed and irritable. Every time I visited, Richard appeared more fatigued, and the atmosphere in the house was tense. Susan's presence, or rather, her absence, loomed over everything, a constant source of stress. One day, I decided to have a candid conversation with Richard. I needed to understand what was happening and how I could help. We sat in the living room, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor. "Richard, I'm worried about you," I began gently. "You need proper care, and with the caretaker gone, I'm not sure you're getting it. What can we do to make things better?" He looked at me, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and resignation. "Ellen, I appreciate your concern. I really do. But Susan insists on handling things herself. She feels it's her responsibility." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "But it's clear she's struggling. Maybe we can find a compromise? Another caretaker? Someone Susan approves of?" Richard shook his head slowly. "I've tried suggesting that, but Susan is very particular. She doesn't trust easily, and she's determined to do things her way." The conversation left me feeling helpless. I wanted to support Richard, but Susan's interference made it nearly impossible. My visits continued, each one filled with a growing sense of frustration and concern. Richard's health was deteriorating, and Susan's handling of the situation was only making things worse. One evening, as I was leaving Richard's house, I ran into the former caretaker at the grocery store. She looked healthier and more relaxed than the last time I'd seen her, but there was still a lingering sadness in her eyes. I approached her, hoping to gain some insight into what had happened. "Hi, it's good to see you again," I said warmly. "I'm sorry about what happened at Richard's. Can you tell me more about why Susan fired you?" She hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. "Susan is, Difficult to work with, she finally admitted. She has very high standards and gets frustrated easily. I tried my best, but nothing seemed to satisfy her. I think she's under a lot of pressure, and it's affecting her judgment. I nodded, absorbing her words. Thank you for telling me. I just want to make sure Richard is okay. He needs proper care. The caretaker gave me a sad smile. He does. Just keep an eye on him. And if you can, try to talk to Susan. She needs help too, even if she doesn't realize it. I decided to have a direct conversation with Susan. I called her and suggested meeting to discuss Richard's care. To my surprise, she agreed to meet at a local cafe the next morning. I hoped that a neutral setting would help facilitate a productive conversation. As I arrived at the cafe, I saw Susan already seated, a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked tired, her face etched with stress and fatigue. I took a deep breath and approached her table, determined to keep the conversation focused and constructive. Good morning, Susan, I greeted her, trying to sound as calm and supportive as possible. Morning, she replied curtly, barely glancing up from her coffee. I sat down and took a moment to gather my thoughts. Susan, I've been really worried about your father. His health is declining, and I think we need to find a more sustainable solution for his care. I'd like to recommend hiring a professional nurse. Susan's reaction was immediate and intense. Her eyes flashed with anger, and she leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. Who the hell do you think you are, Ellen? This is my family, my responsibility. You have no right to interfere. Taken aback by her hostility, I tried to remain composed. Susan, I'm not trying to interfere. I just want to make sure Richard gets the care he needs. This is about his well-being, not about us. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. Sure, that's what you want everyone to believe. But I know better. You're just worried about his estate, aren't you? Making sure you get a piece of the pie. Her words stung and I felt my face flush with anger. That's not true, and you know it. I care about Richard, and I've been part of his life for 15 years. This is about his health, not his money. Susan's expression hardened, and she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. I don't need your help, Ellen. And I don't need you meddling in our family affairs. Stay out of it. Frustrated and hurt, I took a deep breath, trying to find a way to reach her. Susan, this isn't about control or money. It's about making sure your father is taken care of. We need to work together. But it was clear that Susan was not willing to listen. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm done here. Don't ever talk to me about this again. And stay away from my father's business. With that, she walked out of the cafe, leaving me sitting there, stunned and disheartened. I sat for a while, trying to process the confrontation. My intentions had been genuine, but Susan's accusations and hostility had made it clear that she saw me as a threat rather than an ally. As I walked back to my car, I couldn't help but wonder about Susan's motivations. Her refusal to accept help seemed rooted in something deeper than just distrust of me. I knew her relationship with her mother was strained. Susan had mentioned once, in passing, that her mother had remarried and started a new family, leaving Susan feeling abandoned and redundant. Perhaps her need to control her father's care was a way to assert some sense of importance and stability in her life. 2 weeks had passed since my last visit to Richard. During that time, I had made a conscious decision to step back, to focus on my own life and well-being. It wasn't easy, but I felt that after all the years of navigating the complexities of our relationship and dealing with Susan's hostility, I needed to be a bit selfish. I needed to find my own space and reclaim my independence. The first few days were the hardest. I felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and worry about Richard's condition. But I reminded myself that I had already done so much, and it was time for me to live my life without the constant burden of his declining health and family drama. I immersed myself in hobbies I had neglected, reconnected with old friends, and tried to find joy in the little things again. Slowly, I began to feel a sense of relief and freedom. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was Richard. My heart skipped a beat as I answered, unsure of what to expect. Hi Richard, I greeted him, trying to keep my voice steady. Ellen, it's good to hear your voice, he replied, but there was a sadness in his tone that I couldn't ignore. I've missed you. You haven't been by to visit. His words hit me hard. I had been so focused on distancing myself that I hadn't considered how my absence might affect him. Despite everything, I still cared deeply for Richard, and the thought of him feeling lonely pained me. I'm sorry, Richard, I said honestly. I've been trying to take some time for myself, to focus on my own life for a bit. There was a pause on the other end of the line before Richard spoke again. I understand, Ellen. But I've been feeling very lonely. Susan often leaves me alone at night, going out and sometimes not coming back until late. I've been having to manage on my own. His words were like a dagger to my heart. I felt a surge of pity and frustration. Susan had assured me she would take care of him, but it seemed she was failing in her responsibilities. I couldn't ignore the pang of guilt that welled up inside me. "Richard, I didn't know," I replied, my voice softening. "I thought Susan was taking care of you." "She tries, but she's not always here," he admitted. "I understand you need your own life, but it's been hard without you around." I took a deep breath, grappling with my emotions. "Richard, I think maybe we've grown apart. It's been difficult for both of us, and I'm not sure where we stand anymore." His silence spoke volumes. I knew my words were harsh, but they were the truth. Our relationship had been strained for a long time, and the events of the past months had only widened the gap between us. "I see," he finally said, his voice tinged with sadness. "I just wish things were different." We talked for a little while longer, but the conversation was strained and filled with unspoken words. When we finally said goodbye, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. I had been honest with him, but it didn't make the situation any easier. The days that followed were filled with introspection. I couldn't shake the feeling of pity for Richard, knowing he was often left alone. Despite everything, I still cared deeply for him, and the thought of him suffering weighed heavily on my conscience. I wondered if I had made the right decision by stepping back, or if I had been too selfish. One evening, as I sat in my living room reflecting on everything, I received another call from Richard. This time, his voice was more subdued. "Ellen, I know things have been difficult, but I need your help," he said, sounding more vulnerable than I had ever heard him before. "Susan has been out almost every night, and I'm struggling. I don't know what to do." His plea tugged at my heartstrings. I knew I couldn't ignore him. Despite the decision to distance myself, I couldn't abandon him completely. "I'll come by tomorrow," I said gently. "We'll figure something out." The next day I visited Richard. He looked more fragile than ever, and it was clear that he had been struggling. We sat down together, and he opened up about the challenges he had been facing. Susan's behavior had become increasingly erratic, and her absences were taking a toll on him. She often left without explanation, and he was left to fend for himself. "I don't know what's gotten into her," Richard said, his voice filled with worry. "She used to be so responsible, but now it's like she's avoiding me." I listened, feeling a mixture of frustration and compassion. Susan's actions were unacceptable, and Richard deserved better care. But I also knew that confronting Susan directly would likely lead to more conflict. "Richard, I'm going to help you get through this," I said firmly. "We'll find a solution together." We discussed various options, including reaching out to other family members and finding additional professional help. I suggested contacting a home care agency to provide more consistent support, and Richard agreed. The following days were busy as I coordinated with care providers and ensured Richard's needs were met. I also spoke with Emily, the nurse who had been helping Richard part-time, and arranged for her to increase her visits. Emily was a godsend, and her presence provided much-needed stability. During this time, I also attempted to reach out to Susan, hoping to address the situation diplomatically. I called her and left messages, but she didn't respond. It was clear that she was avoiding both me and the responsibilities of caring for her father. One evening, while I was at Richard's house, Susan finally returned home. It was late, and she looked disheveled and exhausted. She seemed surprised to see me there, but her surprise quickly turned to anger. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "I'm here to help Richard," I replied calmly. "He's been struggling, and we need to find a better solution for his care." Susan scoffed, crossing her arms. "I don't need your help, Ellen. This is my family, my responsibility." "It's clear that you're overwhelmed, Susan," I said gently. "There's no shame in asking for help. Richard needs consistent care, and I think we should work together to make sure he gets it." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You just want to interfere so you can get your hands on his estate. I know your type." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "This isn't about money, Susan. It's about Richard's well-being. We both care about him, and he deserves the best care possible." Susan's hostility didn't abate, but she didn't argue further. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling both frustrated and determined. Recently I focused on reclaiming my own life, but my concern for Richard never truly faded. I still called to check in on him and coordinated with his caregivers to ensure he had everything he needed. Despite our strained relationship and Susan's ongoing hostility, my love for Richard remained steadfast. Last month, while I was out running errands, I received a call from Richard's nurse. Her voice was calm but urgent. "Ellen, Richard has had a fall. He's being taken to the hospital now. I thought you should know." My heart raced, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. The drive there felt interminable, my mind racing with worry about Richard's condition. I prayed that he would be okay. When I arrived at the hospital, I rushed to the emergency room. I found Richard lying in a hospital bed, gradually waking up. Relief washed over me as I saw his eyes flutter open. He looked groggy but seemed to be regaining consciousness. "Richard," I called softly, stepping closer to his bedside. "How are you feeling?" He turned his head slowly to look at me, a weak smile forming on his lips. "Ellen, you're here," he murmured. I'm okay, I think, just a bit shaken up." I reached out and gently squeezed his hand. "I'm so glad you're awake. You gave us all a scare." As I stood there, holding Richard's hand, the door to the room swung open, and Susan stumbled in. She reeked of alcohol, her movements unsteady and her eyes wild. She glared at me with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. "What are you doing here?" she slurred, her voice dripping with venom. "Haven't you done enough?" I tried to remain calm, but her words and the sight of her in such a state were infuriating. "Susan, I'm here to check on Richard. He's just had a fall and—" "Shut up!" she screamed, cutting me off. "You're always meddling, always trying to interfere. This is my family, not yours." Her words were like a knife to the heart. I had come to help Richard, and here she was, drunk and belligerent, attacking me for caring. The frustration and anger that had been building up inside me for months finally reached a boiling point. "Susan, you're drunk. You need to leave," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't helping anyone." "Don't tell me what to do," she shouted, stumbling closer. "You're nothing but a selfish, greedy—" Before I could stop myself, my hand flew up and I slapped her across the face. The sound echoed in the small hospital room, and for a moment, there was a stunned silence. Susan's eyes widened in shock, and then she lunged at me, but the nurses and a few other visitors quickly intervened, pulling us apart. "How dare you!" Susan screamed, trying to break free from their grasp. "You'll pay for this, you bitch!" I stood there, breathing heavily, my hand still stinging from the impact. The room was a blur of chaos and noise, but through it all, I could hear Richard's voice, weak but stern. "Ellen, go home," he said, his voice filled with disappointment. "You shouldn't have hit her. Just go." His words cut deeper than any of Susan's accusations. I looked at him, my heart breaking. "Richard, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Just go," he repeated, closing his eyes as if to shut out the world. Tears filled my eyes as I turned and walked out of the room. The weight of Richard's disapproval and the confrontation with Susan hung heavily on me. As I left the hospital, I felt a profound sense of loss and sadness. The man I had cared for, loved, and supported for so many years had turned me away, and I didn't know if I could ever repair the damage that had been done. In the days that followed, I kept my distance from Richard and his family. I needed time to process what had happened and to figure out how to move forward. The guilt and sadness were overwhelming, and I struggled to find a way to reconcile my actions with my intentions. One evening, as I sat in my living room, the events replaying in my mind, I received a call from Emily. Her voice was gentle, filled with concern. "Ellen, I wanted to check in on you. I heard about what happened at the hospital." I sighed, feeling the weight of the past few days pressing down on me. "It's been really hard, Emily. I don't know what to do." "Ellen, you've been through a lot. It's understandable that you're feeling this way. But you've always had Richard's best interests at heart. Don't lose sight of that." Her words brought a small measure of comfort, but they didn't erase the pain. "Thank you, Emily. I just don't know how to fix this." "Sometimes it's not about fixing things," she said softly. "Sometimes it's about finding a way to move forward, even if it's not the way you envisioned." I spent the next few days reflecting on Emily's words. I realized that I couldn't change what had happened, but I could decide how to respond. I decided to write a letter to Richard, expressing my feelings and apologizing for my actions. It was the only way I could think of to convey my thoughts without causing more conflict. In the letter, I poured out my heart, explaining the frustration and worry that had driven me to slap Susan. I expressed my regret and apologized for my actions, hoping that Richard would understand my intentions, even if he couldn't forgive my outburst. A few days later, I mailed the letter, feeling a mixture of hope and trepidation. I didn't know if Richard would read it or if it would make any difference, but it was the only way I could think of to reach out to him. In the meantime, I focused on my own well-being. I continued to see friends, pursue hobbies, and take care of myself. It wasn't easy, but I knew I needed to find a way to move forward, even if it meant doing so without Richard in my life. Update. A month had passed. I hadn't heard from Richard or Susan since then, and I had decided to focus on my work and try to put the events behind me. Immersing myself in my job was a way to distract myself from the guilt and sadness that lingered after our falling out. My days became a blur of meetings, deadlines, and tasks that kept my mind occupied, leaving little room for personal reflection. However, life has a way of bringing back unresolved issues when you least expect it. One day, while catching up with a mutual acquaintance, I overheard a conversation that stopped me in my tracks. The acquaintance mentioned, in a hushed tone, that Susan had contracted HIV due to her reckless behavior. The term disease of the century echoed in my mind, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a devastating revelation that added a new layer of complexity to everything that had happened. I tried to process this information as I drove home, my mind racing with thoughts and emotions. Susan's illness explained so much about her erratic behavior and her hostility towards me. She had been struggling with a secret burden, one that she had not shared with anyone, least of all her father. The realization that Richard was unaware of his daughter's condition weighed heavily on me. He was already fighting his own health battles, and now his daughter was seeking death as an escape from her pain. As I pulled into my driveway, I felt a sense of dread and despair settle over me. The weight of what I had learned felt unbearable, and I knew that I couldn't simply ignore it. My heart ached for Richard and Susan, both suffering in their own ways, both isolated in their struggles. The walls of my home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, trapping me with my thoughts and regrets. Over the next few days, I found it increasingly difficult to focus on my work. The knowledge of Susan's illness gnawed at me, making it impossible to concentrate. Each time I sat down at my desk, trying to immerse myself in my tasks, my mind would drift back to that devastating revelation. The weight of what I had learned seemed to press down on my shoulders, making even the simplest tasks feel insurmountable. I replayed our last conversation in my mind over and over again. The harsh words exchanged, the anger that had driven us apart, and the intense frustration that had boiled over into that confrontation. Knowing what I knew now, I felt a profound sense of guilt. Had I been too harsh? Had I failed to see the signs of her suffering? These questions haunted me, eroding my sense of peace and leaving me feeling helpless and conflicted. Every glance at my computer screen or stack of papers brought a pang of guilt. The emails and deadlines that once seemed so important now felt trivial in the face of Susan's struggle. My mind wandered back to that fateful day at the hospital. The look of pain in Susan's eyes, and the bitter accusations we had hurled at each other. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much pain she must have been in, pain that I had failed to recognize. It was clear to me that while Richard was struggling with his illness, his daughter was fighting her own battle, one that was equally devastating. Susan's reckless behavior, her late-night escapades, and her erratic absences were not just signs of irresponsibility. They were cries for help, symptoms of a deeper, more insidious pain that she had been hiding from everyone, including herself. The realization that she had been seeking death to escape her suffering was almost too much to bear. It was a stark reminder of the profound impact that our actions and relationships can have on those around us. As I reflected on this, I began to understand the broader implications of what I had learned. It was only then that I truly grasped how the relationship between husband and wife greatly affects the children's perception. Richard and his ex-wife's tumultuous relationship, their bitter divorce, and the emotional fallout had all left deep scars on Susan. She had grown up in an environment where love and support were conditional, where trust had been broken, and where emotional wounds had never truly healed. The dysfunction in Richard's marriage had created a ripple effect, shaping Susan's perceptions and behaviors in ways that were now painfully evident. Her desperate attempts to escape her reality, her anger, and her fear were all rooted in the experiences of her past. She had watched her parents' relationship fall apart, had felt the sting of abandonment from her mother, and had struggled to find her place in a world that seemed to offer no solace. As these realizations settled in, I felt a growing sense of responsibility. I couldn't change the past, but I could try to make amends for my part in the present. Susan needed support and understanding, not judgment and criticism. Richard needed to know the truth about his daughter's struggles so that he could be there for her in a meaningful way. But how could I approach this delicate situation without causing more harm? After my wife passed away, I entrusted all our assets to our child. This decision infuriated my next wife. My name is Nathan Harper. My life changed irreversibly 3 years ago when my beloved wife Emma passed away unexpectedly. The shock of her death still haunts me, a grim reminder of how quickly and tragically life can alter. We had been together for 20 beautiful years, building a life full of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Emma was my anchor, my confidant, and the mother of our daughter, Lily. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. Emma was a vibrant, loving woman with an infectious zest for life. She was dedicated to her career as a pediatrician, always putting her heart into helping children. Her passion extended to our home, where she created a nurturing environment for Lily and me. We had met in college, and from the moment we locked eyes, I knew she was the one. We shared countless memories. Our first home, the birth of Lily, family vacations, and quiet moments of contentment. Emma had a unique ability to make every day feel special. The day Emma died is etched into my memory with painful clarity, a series of moments that I often replay, wishing I could somehow alter the course of events. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon. Emma had just finished her shift at the pediatric clinic, a place where she poured her heart and soul into caring for children. She called me before leaving, her voice tired but cheerful as she spoke about a particularly challenging case she had handled that day. "I'll be home soon," she said. "Let's have dinner together and maybe watch that movie we've been putting off." I had no reason to think that this would be our last conversation. The accident happened just a few miles from our home. Emma was driving along the familiar route, a stretch of road she had traveled countless times. According to the police report, a large truck had veered out of its lane, crossing the median and colliding head-on with Emma's car. The impact was devastating. The truck driver later revealed that he had fallen asleep at the wheel, a tragic lapse that had catastrophic consequences. I received the call around 5:30 p.m. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something in me sensed that it wasn't going to be good news. The voice on the other end was calm and professional, but the words they spoke shattered my world. "Mr. Anderson, this is Officer Blake from the County Police Department. Your wife, Emma Anderson, has been in a severe car accident. I'm afraid she didn't survive the impact." For a moment, everything around me stopped. The air seemed to thicken, and I couldn't breathe. I heard the officer's voice continuing, explaining the details and asking if there was someone I could call to be with me. But I was numb, my mind refusing to process the reality of what I was hearing. Emma, my Emma, was gone. Just like that, in an instant, our lives were irrevocably changed. I managed to call a neighbor, a close friend who rushed over to be with me. Together, we went to the hospital to identify her body. Seeing Emma there, lifeless and cold, was the most excruciating experience of my life. She looked so peaceful, as if she were merely sleeping, but the reality was far more brutal. The vibrant, loving woman who had been my partner for 20 years was no more. Breaking the news to Lily was a task I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. She had been at a friend's house, studying for an upcoming exam. I remember driving over, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. When she saw me, she knew something was wrong. "Dad, what's happened?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. I took her hands in mine, trying to steady my voice. "Lily, there's been an accident," I began, my voice breaking. "Mom didn't make it. She's gone." The look of disbelief and anguish on her face will haunt me forever. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. In that moment, I felt utterly helpless, unable to protect my daughter from the profound pain that had just enveloped our lives. The days that followed were a blur of grief and disbelief. We had to arrange the funeral, a task that seemed impossible in our state of mourning. Friends and family came to offer their condolences, but nothing could ease the ache in our hearts. Emma had been the glue that held us together, and without her, everything felt fractured. Lily struggled immensely. At 15 she was on the cusp of adulthood, but losing her mother thrust her into a world of sorrow and confusion that no teenager should have to navigate. She had been so close to Emma, they shared a bond that was beautiful to witness. Now she was left grappling with an overwhelming sense of loss. She threw herself into her studies, perhaps as a way to keep her mind occupied, but I could see the pain in her eyes, the moments when the weight of her grief would come crashing down. As for me, I was adrift in a sea of sorrow. Emma had been my rock, my confidant, the person I turned to in times of trouble. Without her, I felt unmoored, struggling to find my footing in a world that no longer made sense. The nights were the hardest, lying awake in our bed, the emptiness beside me a constant reminder of what I had lost. Every corner of our home held memories of Emma, from the photos on the walls to the scent of her perfume lingering in the air. People often say that time heals all wounds, but in those early days, I couldn't see how that was possible. The pain was too raw, too all-encompassing. My only solace was in being there for Lily, trying to support her as best as I could. We leaned on each other, our shared grief a bond that both united and tore us apart. Emma and I had often talked about our future and what we wanted for Lily. Although we hadn't formalized it in a will, it was clear to me that Emma intended for Lily to inherit everything we had worked so hard to build. Emma's own parents had left her everything, and she always believed in the importance of leaving a legacy for our daughter. So, when Emma passed away without a will, the legal proceedings divided everything equally between Lily and me. But in my heart, I knew Emma's true wishes. Lily and I supported each other through those dark days, leaning on each other as we tried to find a new normal. Despite her youth, Lily displayed remarkable resilience and strength. She threw herself into her studies and extracurricular activities, perhaps as a way to cope with her grief. I tried to be there for her, to fill the void left by Emma as best as I could. But I knew I could never replace her mother. About a year and a half ago, I met someone new. Jessica. Our meeting was unexpected, one of those serendipitous moments that life occasionally offers. I was at a charity event, something I had thrown myself into as a way to give back and stay busy. The event was a fundraiser for a local children's hospital, an institution close to my heart because of Emma's work as a pediatrician. I found solace in helping others, trying to channel my grief into something positive. The venue was bustling with activity. Volunteers were setting up tables, arranging decorations, and preparing for the evening's festivities. As I navigated through the crowd, my eyes caught sight of a woman who seemed to be at the center of the action, effortlessly organizing the chaos around her. She was warm, engaging, and had a certain charisma that drew people in. Her laughter rang out, a melodious sound that seemed to cut through the noise and reach something deep within me. We ended up at the same table, working on a last-minute decoration task. Our conversation started casually, but soon, we were talking about everything. From our favorite books to the challenges of parenting teenagers. There was an instant connection, a feeling that I hadn't experienced since Emma. Before I knew it, hours had passed. The event came to an end, and as people started to leave, Jessica and I exchanged numbers, promising to keep in touch. Jessica and I started seeing each other regularly. It felt strange at first, to be with someone new after so many years with Emma. There was a sense of guilt, as if moving on meant betraying Emma's memory. But Jessica had a way of making me feel alive again. She brought a sense of hope and possibility back into my life. Her presence was like a gentle breeze that swept away the lingering shadows of grief. Our relationship developed quickly. We found that we had many common interests. An appreciation for classic literature, a love of hiking, and a shared passion for volunteering. Our personalities complemented each other well. Jessica was outgoing and sociable, while I was more reserved and introspective. Her energy balanced my calm, and together, we found a harmonious rhythm. Jessica was understanding and compassionate, especially when it came to my grief over Emma. She never pressured me to move faster than I was ready for, and she listened patiently when I needed to talk about my late wife. Her empathy was a balm to my wounded heart. She understood that Emma would always be a part of my life, and she respected that, never trying to replace her but rather carving out her own unique place in my heart. Jessica had a 17-year-old daughter from a previous relationship, Emily, who was vibrant and full of life. The four of us, Jessica, her daughter, Lily and I, began spending time together as a blended family. Our first outings were simple: picnics in the park, movie nights at home, and weekend hikes. There were initial awkward moments as we all adjusted to the new dynamics, but slowly, bonds began to form. Lily, still grappling with her own grief, found a kindred spirit in Emily. They were close in age and shared similar interests, from music to fashion. It was heartwarming to see them grow closer, supporting each other through the challenges of adolescence. Jessica and I marveled at how well our daughters got along, often finding them lost in conversation or planning their next adventure together. After a year of dating, I proposed to Jessica. It felt right, like a new chapter that I was ready to embrace. The proposal was a simple, intimate affair. I took her to the botanical garden where we had our first official date. As we walked through the blooming flowers, I knelt down on one knee and asked her to marry me. Jessica's eyes filled with tears of joy, and she said yes, her smile radiant under the evening sky. Jessica was thrilled, and we started making plans for our future together. We discussed everything. Where we would live, how we would blend our families, and our hopes for the future. We envisioned a home filled with love and laughter, where our daughters could thrive and where we could build new memories together. It was a future that, for the first time in a long while, seemed bright and full of promise. As our relationship grew more serious, Jessica and I began to discuss our future in more detail. Inevitably, the conversation turned to finances and inheritance. Jessica was under the impression that everything I had, including what I inherited from Emma, would be part of our shared future. She envisioned a life where our resources were pooled together to provide for both her daughter, Emily, and our potential future children. This assumption, however, led to a significant point of contention between us. Before getting engaged, I had made a crucial decision that I knew would impact our future together. I had transferred everything that I inherited from Emma to Lily. This decision was rooted in a deep sense of duty and commitment to honor Emma's wishes. Although Emma had not left a formal will, our conversations over the years made her intentions clear to me. Emma was a meticulous planner and a dedicated mother. We often talked about our hopes and dreams for Lily's future. Emma was particularly passionate about ensuring that Lily would have the means to pursue her dreams without financial burden. She wanted Lily to have access to the best education, opportunities to travel, and the security to make choices based on passion rather than necessity. Emma's parents had left her everything, and she always intended to follow that tradition, believing it was the best way to secure Lily's future. The absence of a will was a tragic oversight, a consequence of Emma's sudden and untimely death. Despite this, I felt a moral obligation to act on what I knew to be her wishes. Transferring the assets to Lily was my way of fulfilling Emma's vision and ensuring that her hard work and sacrifices directly benefited our daughter. This decision was not made lightly. I spent countless nights reflecting on the potential repercussions and how it might affect my burgeoning relationship with Jessica. I knew that blending our families was going to be complex, and financial matters often complicate such situations even further. But the more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that this was the right thing to do. Emma had dedicated so much of her life to building a secure future for Lily, and it was my responsibility to see that through. The revelation came on an otherwise quiet evening. Jessica and I were sitting in the living room, enjoying a rare moment of peace. We had been discussing wedding plans and the logistics of blending our families. Amidst the conversation, Jessica brought up the topic of finances, eager to understand how we would manage our resources moving forward. "I think it's important that we start discussing our financial future together," Jessica said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "We should talk about combining our assets and making sure that Emily and Lily are both taken care of equally." Her words hung in the air, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. I had been dreading this conversation, knowing it would inevitably lead to the difficult subject of the asset transfer. I took a deep breath, deciding that honesty was the only way forward. "Jessica, there's something you need to know," I began, my voice steady but tinged with apprehension. "Before we got engaged, I transferred everything I inherited from Emma to Lily. I felt it was the right thing to do, given Emma's wishes." Jessica's smile faded, replaced by a look of confusion and disbelief. "What do you mean you transferred everything to Lily?" she asked, her tone sharp. "How much are we talking about?" I explained the details: the house, the savings, the investments. Everything that Emma and I had worked for, I had ensured would go to our daughter. As I spoke, I could see the realization dawn on Jessica, her eyes narrowing and her lips pressing into a thin line. "So, you're saying that everything Emma left you is now in Lily's name?" she asked, her voice rising. "How could you make such a huge decision without discussing it with me first?" "I did it because it's what Emma would have wanted," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "She always intended for Lily to inherit everything. I felt it was my duty to honor her wishes." Jessica stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "And what about our future? What about Emily? Did you even consider us?" She felt blindsided and betrayed, believing that I had acted unilaterally without considering our shared future. Her anger and disappointment were palpable. Jessica argued that our marriage should mean sharing everything, including financial assets, and that by transferring everything to Lily, I was excluding her and Emily from our future plans. I tried to explain my reasoning to Jessica, hoping she would understand the depth of my commitment to honoring Emma's legacy. I told her about the conversations Emma and I had, the dreams we had for Lily, and the profound responsibility I felt to uphold those dreams. I emphasized that this was not a reflection of my feelings for Jessica or her daughter, but rather a fulfillment of a promise I made to Emma, even if that promise was never formally documented. Jessica's perspective was different. She saw the transfer as a barrier to our future, a sign that I was not fully committed to our new family. She felt that her daughter and any future children we might have were being unfairly excluded from resources that could benefit everyone. Her arguments were passionate and heartfelt, underscoring her desire to build a life together based on mutual support and shared responsibilities. The situation put me in a difficult position. On one hand, I understood Jessica's point of view. She wanted to ensure that our blended family operated as a cohesive unit, with no distinctions between my assets and our assets. On the other hand, my obligation to Emma's memory and Lily's future weighed heavily on my heart. Emma had been my partner in every sense of the word, and her wishes were a guiding force in my decision-making process. I also considered the implications of merging everything too quickly. Jessica and Emily were relatively new additions to our lives, and while my feelings for them were genuine and strong, the circumstances of the inheritance were unique. Emma's contributions were significant, and I felt it was premature to merge those assets without ensuring that Lily's future was secure. This was not just about money, it was about respecting the legacy of a woman who had given so much to her family. The decision to give everything to Lily was also about fairness. Lily had lost her mother, and no amount of money could ever compensate for that loss. But ensuring she had the financial stability to pursue her dreams, go to college, and start her adult life with a safety net was something I could do for her. It was my way of trying to make things right in a situation where so much had gone wrong. Navigating this complex situation has been challenging. Balancing my love for Jessica, and my commitment to honoring Emma's legacy is a delicate act. I want to build a future with Jessica, but not at the expense of disregarding what Emma and I had envisioned for our daughter. This tension has forced me to reflect deeply on my values, responsibilities, and the kind of legacy I want to leave behind for both Lily and any future family. As I stand at this crossroads, I am determined to find a solution that respects both my past with Emma and my future with Jessica. It's not an easy path, but I believe that with understanding, compassion, and clear communication, we can navigate through this and find a way forward that honors everyone involved. Am I the A for deciding to break up with my boyfriend after he punished my 8-year-old son by leaving him home alone? My name is Laura, a 35-year-old project manager living in a suburban neighborhood. Balancing my professional life with being a single mother to 2 energetic boys, Ethan, who is 12, and Jake, who is 8, is no easy feat. Each day starts with a whirlwind of activities. Preparing breakfast, ensuring homework is packed, and finally dropping them off at school before heading to my own demanding job. Evenings are filled with helping with school projects, managing soccer practices, and ensuring we have some quality family time despite our hectic schedules. 3 years ago, I met Mark, a 37-year-old architect, at a community charity event. Our connection was instant. We both shared a passion for our careers and a deep love for our children. Mark has 2 kids of his own, Lily, who is 11, and Max, a lively 6-year-old. As single parents navigating the complexities of work and family, we found solace and understanding in each other's company. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, often revolving around the joys and challenges of parenting, and it wasn't long before our friendship blossomed into something deeper. The early days of our relationship were marked by cautious excitement. We spent many evenings sharing stories about our children and discussing our hopes for the future. The idea of blending our families was both thrilling and daunting. We knew it would require patience, understanding, and a lot of love. For the first 2 years, we focused on strengthening our bond while slowly introducing the idea of merging our lives to our kids. A year ago, we took the significant step of introducing our children to each other. We started with casual playdates and group outings to create a comfortable environment for them. Initially, there were the expected hiccups, sibling rivalries, territorial disputes, and the occasional bout of jealousy. However, with time and consistent effort, the kids began to form their own bonds. They learned to share, compromise, and find common ground, whether it was through a game of soccer or a shared love for animated movies. As our children grew more comfortable with each other, Mark and I decided to take another step forward. For the past few months, we've been having weekend stays at my place, transforming it into a lively, bustling home filled with laughter, occasional disagreements, and lots of love. These weekends were a blend of organized activities and relaxed family time, from baking cookies together to going on nature hikes. Over the past few months, our families have been slowly integrating, with Mark and his kids spending weekends at my place. It has been a journey filled with ups and downs, but mostly, it has been a rewarding experience. The children, who were initially wary of each other, have started to bond. Ethan, my eldest, has taken to helping Max with his reading, and it warms my heart to see them sitting together on the couch, Ethan patiently guiding Max through a storybook. Jake and Lily, despite the age difference, have found common ground in their love for board games and outdoor adventures. Our weekends are now filled with the sound of children laughing, the aroma of home-cooked meals, and the sight of kids sprawled out in the living room, engrossed in a movie or a game. We've had family outings to the zoo, picnics in the park, and even a memorable camping trip where we all slept under the stars and shared stories around a campfire. One of my favorite bonding activities has been our Sunday morning pancake tradition. Each child has a role. Ethan mixes the batter, Jake sets the table, Lily slices the fruit, and Max, under careful supervision, flips the pancakes. These moments, though simple, have been instrumental in bringing us closer together, fostering a sense of unity and family. The idea for the water park trip came up during one of our family dinners. The kids were discussing their favorite summer activities, and the excitement was palpable when the suggestion of a water park was made. Mark and I exchanged glances, smiling at the enthusiasm around the table. We decided to make it a reality, setting a date and planning the details. As the day approached, the children could hardly contain their excitement. They talked incessantly about the rides they wanted to try, the snacks they planned to bring, and the fun they anticipated having. I could see how much this outing meant to them, and it made me even more determined to make it a special day. My work schedule, however, posed a small challenge. I had a few hours of work in the morning, but we figured out a plan. Mark would take the kids to the water park at noon, and I would join them as soon as I was done. It seemed like a perfect arrangement. I trusted Mark completely. He had proven time and again to be a responsible and caring partner. The night before the trip was a flurry of activity. I did the laundry, ensuring everyone had their swimsuits, towels, and extra clothes ready. The kids were buzzing with excitement, helping me pack a picnic basket with sandwiches, fruits, and drinks. Ethan and Jake took it upon themselves to gather their favorite pool toys, while Lily and Max sorted through a collection of board games and cards to bring along. I stayed up a bit later than usual, making sure everything was in order. I double-checked the weather forecast, packed sunscreen, and ensured the car was fueled up and ready to go. By the time I went to bed, I felt satisfied that we were well prepared for a fun and hassle-free day. The morning of the trip was no different. I woke up early, made breakfast, and went over the plan with Mark one last time. I reminded him of the park's address, the meeting time, and where to find the tickets I had purchased online. The kids were already dressed in their swimsuits, eagerly bouncing around the house. As I headed out the door to work, I felt a mix of excitement and reassurance. I kissed the kids goodbye, reminding them to listen to Mark and behave. I trusted Mark implicitly, believing that he would take good care of them until I could join them at the park. The anticipation of seeing their joyful faces later that day kept me going through the morning's tasks. Little did I know that this seemingly well-laid plan would soon unravel, leading to a confrontation that would test our relationship and my instincts as a mother. As I drove to work, I couldn't shake the feeling of excitement mixed with a hint of apprehension. But I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the joy this day was supposed to bring. The water park awaited, and I was determined to make it a memorable day for all of us. The morning at work was uneventful but busy. I completed my tasks with the usual efficiency, but my mind frequently wandered to the water park. I imagined the kids' delighted faces as they splashed around, the laughter and screams of joy echoing in the air. Mark had sent a couple of reassuring texts, confirming that everything was going smoothly. He mentioned that the kids were behaving well and were eagerly awaiting my arrival. Finally noon arrived, and I wrapped up my work quickly. I was filled with excitement as I drove towards the water park, eager to join my family and share in their fun. As I pulled into the parking lot, I scanned the area for Mark and the kids, anticipating the sight of them playing and having a great time. When I arrived at the water park and saw that Jake wasn't there, my heart skipped a beat. Panic surged through me, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My mind raced with thoughts of where he could be and why he wasn't with the rest of the children. I rushed over to Mark, my voice trembling with urgency as I demanded, "Where's Jake?" Mark's nonchalant response only fueled my anger. "He's at home with your mother," he said calmly. "He didn't put away his laundry, so he didn't earn the right to come." My initial panic transformed into a white-hot rage. How could he make such a unilateral decision about my child without consulting me? Jake was only 8 years old. This was not a punishment that fit the so-called crime. I had washed the laundry the night before, and I hadn't even told Jake to put his clothes away. The injustice of it all made my blood boil. "You left him at home for not putting away laundry? Are you serious?" Mark remained calm but firm, which only irritated me further. "Laura, he needs to learn that actions have consequences. If we don't enforce rules, how will they ever learn responsibility?" His words rang hollow to me. This wasn't about teaching responsibility, it was about overstepping boundaries and exerting authority where he had none. "You have no right to make that decision without talking to me first. You can't just punish my son like that. He's only 8, Mark." The more we talked, the more heated our exchange became. Mark dug in his heels, insisting that we needed to present a united front when it came to disciplining the kids. He argued that if we didn't show a cohesive approach, it would create a chaotic and disrespectful environment. "Laura, we need to be on the same page. If we let the kids think they can get away with not following rules, we're setting them up for failure." His words felt like a slap in the face. "But this isn't your decision to make. You can't just decide to leave my son behind without even telling me. That's not how you build trust or respect." Mark's eyes narrowed, frustration evident on his face. "So what, Laura? I'm supposed to have no say in how your kids are raised? If we're going to be a family, we need to work together." I could feel the tears of anger and frustration welling up. "This isn't working together. This is you taking over and making my child feel like he's unwanted. This isn't about responsibility, it's about you overstepping your bounds." Realizing that the argument was going nowhere and that my priority was Jake, I made a swift decision. "I'm going to get Jake. This discussion is over." I turned to Ethan and told him to get in the car. Mark's confusion and protests followed me, but I was beyond listening. I gathered our belongings with a singular focus, my heart aching for my little boy who had been unfairly left out. Mark tried to justify his actions, calling after me, "Laura, you're overreacting. We need to show the kids that we're serious about discipline." But I was done. I wasn't going to stand by and let someone else make my child feel less than he deserved. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I felt guilty for leaving Jake behind, even though it wasn't my decision. I was furious with Mark for overstepping his boundaries and making my son feel punished for something so minor. Most of all, I was determined to get to Jake and make sure he was okay. When we arrived home, I rushed inside to find Jake. He was sitting on the couch with my mother, looking sad and confused. I hugged him tightly, assuring him that everything was going to be okay. My mother, sensing the tension, took Ethan into the kitchen to give us some privacy. I apologized to Jake, explaining that what happened wasn't fair and that he didn't deserve to be left behind. He nodded, still looking a bit bewildered, but seemed to understand. I felt a surge of resolve as I realized that I needed to take decisive action. I called Mark and told him that our relationship was over. I couldn't trust him to respect my decisions as a parent, and I couldn't allow him to make such significant decisions about my children without consulting me. He tried to argue, but I stood firm, knowing that this was the right decision for my family. I packed up all of Mark's and his children's belongings, placing them at the end of the driveway. I sent him a text to come collect them, making it clear that he was no longer welcome in our home. Then, I locked the doors and instructed my mother not to let him in under any circumstances. To lift Jake's spirits, I decided to take him and Ethan to a different water park. We spent the rest of the day there, enjoying the rides and the sun, trying to put the morning's events behind us. The boys seemed to relax and have fun, and I felt a sense of relief knowing that I had done the right thing. That night when I went to bed, I reflected on everything that had happened. As a mother, my heart ached for my son. The guilt weighed heavily on me for allowing my anger to take control and for chasing my boyfriend, Mark, away so abruptly. My son Jake didn't deserve to be left behind, and I couldn't shake the image of his sad, confused face when I returned home to find him. I tossed and turned, thinking about how I had always strived to treat all the children fairly, often going out of my way to be gentle and considerate towards Mark's kids. Lily and Max were wonderful children, and I wanted to create a harmonious blended family where everyone felt loved and respected. However, the events of the day made it clear that Mark's approach to discipline was much harsher, especially towards my own children. It hurt to realize that he could be so strict with Jake over something as trivial as not putting away laundry, an oversight I hadn't even mentioned to Jake. I couldn't help but feel sorry for my son. He had been so excited about the trip to the water park, counting down the days with anticipation. Yet, he was left behind, punished unfairly by someone he should have been able to trust. I knew I had to stand up for him, to protect him from such harsh treatment. But as a mother, it also pained me to see the disruption and conflict this caused. As I lay there, I hoped that Mark would call or send a message to apologize, to show some remorse or understanding of why I was so upset. I wanted to believe that he cared enough to make amends, to acknowledge that his actions had hurt not only Jake but also the fragile balance we were trying to build as a family. An apology would have meant the world to me and could have opened the door to forgiveness and reconciliation. But as the hours passed, my phone remained silent. There were no calls, no messages. The absence of any effort from Mark to reach out and apologize only deepened my sense of disappointment and hurt. It made me question whether he truly understood or respected my role as a mother, or the importance of treating all our children with the same care and consideration. I replayed the day's events in my mind, trying to find some clarity amidst the turmoil. Was I right in my actions? Was I justified in ending the relationship so abruptly? I knew that my primary responsibility was to my children, to ensure their safety and well-being. Mark's harshness towards Jake had crossed a line, and I couldn't ignore that. However, the silence from Mark spoke volumes. It made me realize that perhaps he didn't see the error of his ways, or worse, he didn't care enough to make things right. I had always believed that open communication and mutual respect were the cornerstones of any successful relationship, especially in a blended family. Without these, how could we hope to build a loving and supportive environment for our children? The contrast between how I treated his children and how he treated mine was stark. I had gone out of my way to be kind and patient with Lily and Max, understanding their needs and trying to make them feel at home. I wanted them to feel as loved and valued as my own sons. But Mark's strictness with Jake showed a lack of that same empathy and understanding. It wasn't just about a difference in parenting styles. It was about fairness and respect. I questioned whether I had been too lenient, too accommodating, but deep down, I knew that my approach was rooted in love and a desire to build a positive, nurturing environment for all the kids. I believed in teaching responsibility and discipline, but not at the expense of kindness and compassion. Jake needed to feel safe and supported, not harshly judged and punished for minor infractions. As the night wore on, my resolve strengthened. I knew that I had made the right decision in standing up for Jake and ending the relationship with Mark. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was necessary. My children deserved a home where they were treated with respect and where their well-being was the top priority. If Mark couldn't understand or appreciate that, then he wasn't the right person to be a part of our lives. The next morning, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the end of a relationship that I had hoped would bring happiness and unity to our families, but relief in knowing that I had made the right choice for my children's sake. The path ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to create a loving and supportive environment for Ethan and Jake, one where they could thrive without fear of unfair treatment. I also resolved to be more vigilant in ensuring that any future relationship I entered into would be built on mutual respect and understanding, especially when it came to parenting. My children deserve nothing less than a partner who would love and treat them as their own. In the end, the silence from Mark was a blessing in disguise. It clarified his true feelings and priorities, allowing me to move forward with a clear conscience and a strong sense of purpose. My children and their well-being would always come first, and I would continue to be the mother they needed, fiercely protective and unwavering in my love for them.